Secure your Elixir apps with Paraxial IO. From code analysis and bot defense to dependency checks, they've got you covered. Elixir first design with GitHub integration. Elevate your security at Paraxial.io. Testing. What's up? I'm Jacob Blitzo, your Elixir mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor Podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. Today, I'm welcoming back Brian Cardarella, and I always screw his name up, but I think I nailed it.
Yeah, you got it that time.
The CEO of DockYard. If you're not familiar, he specializes in helping companies successfully adopt Elixir and Phoenix for scalable, real-time applications. Welcome back, Brian. It's always awesome catching up with you and getting you back on. So, welcome.
So we're going to talk about adoption today in Elixir, but we were just talking about an interesting topic kind of leading up to this, which was the bifurcation of social media. And I think in some ways this does affect adoption to a degree. And so my experience in the tech community has been largely colored by my earlier career in Ruby on Rails and how that community went out and pushed adoption of its tech stack, and really how ideas and libraries and efforts and anything people were doing got communicated to the community. And so at the time there were three primary avenues, which all three, I feel like at the moment, are broken in the sense that they're not as effective as they used to be. The first being the conference scene. And, since COVID, conferences in general, this is not an Elixir problem, this is just a general in-person event issue, have been largely on the downswing. I think that communities like Elixir's, where we are such a small percentage of the market, we feel that a lot more than some other communities, like React Miami. It just happened a month or so ago, and my feed's blowing up with all these React Miami mentions. But that's a massive community, and so they could. I don't know what their draw was, but I have to imagine it's probably over 1,000 people. And when you're just surrounded by that many people, even if let's say for a good React Miami conference might be 2,000, but they still only attract 1,000 people. That's still a ton of people. Mm-hmm. And then if you're to go to a smaller tech communities conference, and Elixir is in this bucket, and you're only seeing a couple hundred, it can feel demoralizing to a degree. But I think that there's a couple things that people have to keep in mind. And we're going to get to the big kind of was it Damocles knife, sword, hanging over us, which is AI. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But one thing that was said to me early on in my own career was, so years ago I used to run the Boston Ruby meetup, and because of how huge Ruby was and how massive Rails was in terms of market percentage, the Boston meetup as a tech hub had some sway. And so I was fortunate enough that I could reach out to some really big names at the time, and they were more than happy to come and visit and speak. And one of the guys I'd reach out to was Chad Fowler. And for those that don't know Chad, he is, I don't know if he's still at Microsoft. He was there for a period of time. He was CTO at a company that I think that got acquired by Microsoft, but I'm not sure if he's still there. But if you go and look at just his writings, any of his published books, these are books that everyone in the tech community has heard about, and if you haven't, you should hear about them. So Chad has a pretty prolific history in especially in the web development community. But we went to dinner at some point. I had two dinners. I forget. There was one that I went to him with it at a RailsConf in Baltimore, and one up at Boston. I don't remember which one it was, but I was just speaking, and I had mentioned the Ruby community. I think I said several times. Chad stopped me. He goes, "What if I told you there's no such thing as the Ruby community?" I was like, "Well, is this some sort of trick question? What are you testing me? What is this?" And what he kind of described was that what he sees is, those going to the meetups, those going to the conferences, those participating on social media, those that are involved in the open source projects are just like the tip of the spear in terms of those that are actually using a particular technology or tech stack. There is an order of magnitude more people whose day job is to write an Elixir that just clock in, clock out. They're just doing their job. They're writing the language. They may like it, but they don't really want to engage with the community. They don't.
I know a lot of devs like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that, we have to take these things into context sometimes, and that what we see, if we feel like, a conference in itself is not performing as well, and you're kind of using that as your basis for judging a tech stack, then just remember, like, whatever the amount that's there, it's probably more like 10x to 100x that are behind the scenes, that are out there, that are still using it. And just like, all right, I'm not one to go and, socialize. I don't.
A lot of developers by nature too don't want to be out there and be socializing, right? We're like, we like our little tight knit circles. And
to a degree, I mean, I think that this is no secret that the conference existing in Orlando has been problematic for a couple of things. And I've been, this is nothing that I haven't spoken to Jim about before, and he's aware of these issues, and whether or not he thinks they're issues, they're just my opinions. The time of the year is really tough for people, especially, with Elixir being a very senior heavy language. You're going to have a lot of people in this space that have families, that have kids, and trying to get away the weekend before school year starts is really
right. Well, and summer in Florida. Who wants to be in Florida?
Well, yeah, there's that. Orlando is designed as a tourist trap. And so when you go there, like, the flight down there is cheap, but everything else is crazy expensive. So there's like, but I understand the motivation for having gone there. Like, there are, back when these deals were made, I believe this was like back in 2018, 2019, the Elixir conferencing was on the upswing. Up until COVID was hit, I believe that the conference before COVID came out, so this would have been September, August of 2019. I think there were like 600 or 700 at the event, at the conference. And I know that the following year, the conference was thinking about accommodating up to 1,000. And so we were on this upward trajectory, and then COVID hits, everything gets screwed up. But we can't make excuses for these things either, because there's other tech stacks, tech communities that have been able to thrive despite those complications. But regardless, these deals were made, contracts were signed, and unfortunately, Jim was kind of stuck with it. We at DockYard, we did what we could to support the conference up until a point. Unfortunately, we made the decision that we could no longer financially support the conference for this upcoming one. The issues that exist there are really kind of outside of really what could be influenced, in the sense that the conference itself is more like the conference attendance is more of a reflection of the greater kind of, Elixir community as a whole. And so the only way to like really increase the you can try to squeeze every stone on it, right? Like, you could go and like promote the hell out of it. You can go and, try to add whatever type of amenities, and you're going to make like fractional gains on attendance. Like, the real windfall that you're looking for is that we bring in more people. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, is like,
right. Well, you need new faces to make
new faces. Yeah. Well, it's two-sided. It's not just new faces. We have to retain people that are in Elixir. Companies that are using Elixir, finding out why they move on from it, taking them seriously, because I feel like at times there's certainly been some dismissals in that, like, oh, they just
you can't just dismiss it and be like, oh, they just made a bad decision, or it was top down and they didn't really understand the tech change. Like, it's always it's mostly dismissed versus like underlying issue. Yeah.
So retention is like, you can't put more water in the bucket if there's a hole at the bottom, right? Like, that's just not going to work. And
well, so you can.
You can, but it's just going to stay at the same level, or may start getting faster. Like, you gotta you got to work on it for both sides. So adoption is not simply just bringing more people in. It's also like understanding and talking to the people that have left and understanding why. Like what are the reasons that they decide to move on? Like I think in a lot of ways, we in Elixir tend to, I don't know what the right way to put this. Like we tend to look down on other tech at times, because we feel very strongly that our solutions are first class, that our solutions are best in class.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, no, I've done it too. I mean, like so for example, just this past weekend, I had a friend, I haven't seen him in 13 years. He's living in Hong Kong. He's a Stanford CS graduate. What they're working on out there is all this like high network traffic stuff. It's doing some like really complicated processes. And like I was listening to him describe to me the architecture. I'm like, have you looked at Erlang? Have you looked at Elixir? And his response was like, yeah, but it's not popular. And so we're kind of like, there's this chicken or egg problem that exists too. That from my understanding, Erlang has been struggling with forever. Like if you ever talk to Francesco at Erlang Solutions, I come up with some problems that I see, and then I may like mention these to Francesco. And he's like, yeah, we identified these like a decade ago, and we tried this and tried that, and so the problem though that I've seen that's very consistent is that we are trying to force the conversation, right? Like adoption doesn't really happen in mass if you're pushing the rock up the hill. Like adoption happens when it's a pull instead of a push. And if there is a good pull towards the language, if there's a good pull towards the tech stack, people will naturally find themselves moving towards it instead of the overwhelming effort and really insurmountable effort of having to go out and like ask people all the time. However, both need to be done.
Well, it's interesting though, too, when you look at like really popular frameworks like React, I think is a good example. Like sometimes these popular decisions pop up and they just spread like wildfire, right? But I don't really think for like good engineering base or decision, right?
Yeah. Well, so like with React, I saw the development of that because at the time I was heavy in Ember. And when React came on the scene, its big differentiator was its virtual DOM. Because at the time, the comparison amongst all the front end frameworks or libraries or render engines, whatever you want to call it, was there was this test called dbmon. And it was basically like you'd run it in your browser and it would stress test running multiple JS frameworks and then showing like their frames per second. And when React came out, it was one of the first major ones with the virtual DOM, and it just blew everything away. Not like a 10% increase. It was like a 2 to 3 to 5x increase on render times. Even though people did not need these render times. Like that's the thing. It's like okay, if you're doing some like really fast updates, like dbmon was an unrealistic stress test, as most benchmarks are, because it was just rapidly firing like DOM updates and showing these rendering on screen. And ultimately what it was demonstrating was like which library does the least amount of work, because that's going to yield the highest frame rate. And React won. And then because that was the real kind of the major comparison at the time that everyone cared about, a lot of people gravitated towards that. It also a big pull there. It was the name behind it, meaning Facebook. Like right. It came out of Instagram, Instagram was bought by Facebook. And so Facebook was the real backer of it. So there's this kind of like, there's the one side of the technically minded developer that's looking at this like performance advantage that React was bringing in. And because that's all everyone cared about at the time was like render times. And then there's the other, like, the much bigger audience that's saying like, oh, Facebook is using this, so we should use it. And that combined with a very fast like adoption rate of React. But it's the thing that works well with React though. And a lot of JS frameworks are doing this at the time. So there was, I mean, it's still there, like to do MVC, right? It's there's an example of building on a basic to-do list. And what we started to see, I actually don't recall if React did this, but I'm pretty sure Angular did. Simply for the case of adoption, they would add in API that made building to do MVC faster, but you wouldn't be using these APIs normally. Right? Like, these
It's
are
so
like,
funny. It's so funny that like the to-do list app has become such a big thing for.
yeah, it's like Hello World for front end. Um, so but because it was all about just like getting people in the door, and so like the commonality amongst what tech stack a company uses rarely comes down to what is the best technical fit, what
Right,
is
it's
the
what's
best financial fit.
popular.
Well, no, it's not even that. It's just what do I know? Like, do
Mm.
I want to go? Like, if I know React, am I going to really? And if I even acknowledge that its shortcomings, am I going to go burn time on going and learning another tech stack?
I mean, that's how
And
I learned Elixir. I was like, this is just a good fit for me, and I learned it as I was building a product, which it was painful, but I'm
yeah,
glad I did.
yeah, but I think a lot of people, like the majority of people, don't do that, right? And so
Yeah.
like, there's a reason why Python is so popular, not because of AI. I mean, now because of AI, but Python became the language being used at MIT instead of Lisp. And then a lot of other universities are like, oh, MIT is doing that, we should do it. And so you had this, whole generation of computer science students that were coming out of university and college that were trained in Python. And so now they're going to go and build product, and they're going to do it in Python because that's what they know. So there's this kind of like, there's this knowledge gap that exists too. Like, where in that could we get these people exposed to Elixir? Like,
Yeah, Reawakened Games actually just made a good comment. He said most try to make their project fit their tool set versus
yeah,
adjust their tool
exactly.
set. Yeah.
They will go too far in that, and and so in many ways too, they end up exposing deficiencies in that tech stack, and some of these people will end up solving it and then adding more value to that tech stack, right? Like for example, Facebook with PHP, like they built a like ahead of time compiled version of PHP because they didn't want to go and rewrite everything. So they're like, okay, is it going to be less costly for us to go and just rebuild all of our tech stack, or do we just make PHP fast? And so they went and solved that problem. And so like one of the biggest knocks people had against PHP was its runtime performance. Facebook was able to solve that, and because of Facebook's name backing it too, people trust the result of it. And so these are all good for the tech community, but like most people come to Elixir later in their career. Like they've
Mm.
seen the problems that Elixir solves, mostly with concurrency, mostly like with some scale stuff, and that's where they end up finding Elixir. And so our like a path towards adoption largely is uh atypical of where most people end up coming to a particular language. And
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything about Elixir that prevents that from being fixed. It's just that there isn't really any like community effort behind that at the moment. A lot of that does come down to just constant, like more exposure, going to conferences, going to wherever it is that we can. And this is going to bring me back to my kind of like opening salvo point. Um, wherever it is we can interface with the community and get Elixir tried, get people trying Elixir, because more often than not, when I introduce Elixir to people and they're able to actually see it in action, they kind of pick it up pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Like the nature of functional programming, the way that Jose designed the language, like these all just are easy mental models to understand when it comes to the syntax of the language. But the real kind of blocker that they run up against ends up being OTP, because for many that don't have uh I'd say deep background in concurrency, like really understanding, like not just seeing the problems that like having a poor concurrency model causes, but also not having implemented like solutions for concurrency
Yeah,
or
and
another
like
good
I'll like when I
solution.
first started, I didn't even start touching on OTP. Like I feel like I didn't even use it for like a year into
You
like my
use Phoenix,
project.
right?
Yeah, so behind the scenes I was using it, right?
Exactly. And that's
Yeah.
actually where I feel like it works best for those that are coming in, is that they're getting the advantage of OTP without knowing it.
Right. And it
And
just works so well too.
yeah, it works so well. But so we've seen this countless times at DockYard, is like we hear about, like, a client will come to us and say, we we hear that Elixir's fast, but we're not seeing it, right? And like almost 99.9% of the time, it's because they are not using it the way it's intended to be used. They're not like taking advantage of OTP. They're not taking advantage of, you know, not making everything a blocking request. They're not taking advantage of just the common idiomatic way to write uh Elixir or Erlang code.
Hmm.
However, I think too that if people run into this enough times, is this not something that should be addressed in some way? Not in the sense that we need to just abstract OTP away all the time. Is it an education problem? Is it a communication problem? Is it a marketing problem? Like there's a gap that exists right now where enough people are kicking the tires on Elixir, not seeing the immediate benefit that they're told is there, and then just saying, nah.
Yeah, that's
And
interesting. Or it'll stay a hobby versus implementing it in a project.
right. I mean, there's this whole other aspect of how do you convince your company to use it. That's a whole topic unto itself. I just want to close the loop on the in-person stuff for a moment. And so like the conference scene is really downstream of like the larger adoption, issues of any, or adoption efforts of any technology. But then like my history, the meetups were really large for this. The local communities were huge, not just for like being able to disseminate information, but also just for the culture. So like I have friends that are, I'm still really good friends with, that were part of the Boston Ruby community. I actually can't say I know anybody I'm really good friends with in the Boston Elixir community, because there really isn't one. Like meetups just tanked
Yeah.
during and after COVID. And we have some people that are doing a good job of maintaining their communities. I think Justin in Austin, Texas is doing a great job. There's a few others as well. And Erlang Solutions has been, I think, really carrying the torch on trying to keep these smaller regional conferences going in many ways. Bruce and Maggie down in the Gig City Elixir, and there's a few others too. Like these are all great efforts, but there just seems to be a much smaller appetite to go out and interface in person nowadays. And I think that what you're doing, and what some of the really big tech influencers have been doing, is on the upswing. Whereas like some of these, and yeah, you may be able to track like numbers and say, hey, we're like our conference attendance numbers are better this year than last year. But like, what's easier? Is it easier for me to go and pay a crazy amount of money for like an airline ticket, like go stay at a hotel, go travel, be away? Every time I fly, I get sick. And so that's like right away just a thing for
Yeah,
me.
that's the worst. Well,
Or
especially if it's international. I feel like international
yeah,
flights,
yeah.
you're
Or if I
getting
just pop
sick.
onto a YouTube channel and watch what people are
Right.
talking about. However, the downside there is that it creates a hyper um like tunnel vision on a particular topic. So whereas like a meetup can have significantly more diversity, you're exposed to a lot more, not just in like the type of speakers, but the topics. Like if you're watching a particular tech influencer, you're really kind of like down their narrow path on what their particular tech interests are. And so
Hmm.
then just go, okay, all right, now I can diversify my like the influencers I'm watching. But this video is going to go on for about like 90 minutes or so. Some of those other guys go on for like 2-3 hours. How much time in the day do we have to actually go
Right.
through all this stuff?
Well, like I don't have time to keep up with podcasts I want to listen to, even when I'm
Yeah.
interested in the topics. It's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. And I've been starting to like increase the playback speed, but I just find at times I miss things. I have to go back and like re-listen
Well, you
if I
miss
really want to
things
hear
if
it.
you're working and listening, you miss a lot, right? Like, because
Yeah.
if I'm like doing any kind of focused work, I can't really have anything but like music I don't care about playing in the
Yeah.
background, but
So all that to say, I think that in general, um, the like the path towards uh like talking about Elixir is not super clear in many ways because the more like traditional avenues for promoting are in a vastly different position than they were historically. The opportunities for coming on to these tech influencer podcasts are very limited. Um, Conferences still have their place, but like most of the general tech conferences have swung over to AI almost completely. So if your topic is not AI related, then you can't really get it in, or they're not particularly interested. Like I try to put my money where my mouth is sometimes, and so I was like, all right, I'm going to go out and start submitting Elixir conference talks at not Elixir
mm-hmm.
like not Elixir specific conferences because I don't want to talk to the bubble anymore. I want to get outside the bubble, talk to other people. And so I submitted to LambdaConf and I spoke at LambdaConf, but unfortunately I learned like a week before the conference that it was the final LambdaConf. Attendance was way down. I had like 10 people in my talk.
Dang.
Yeah, so
Because I
it's
know you've been talking like for as long as I've known you, you've been talking about go to non-Elixir conferences, and I think it's a smart move. It's
yeah. I mean, well, so I pushed this really hard with with Jose for a while, which was this idea of having regionally like people regionally that were kind of uh officially tasked with going and like DevRel people for
mm-hmm.
Elixir that can go and talk about Elixir. And I'm not involved with it in any way, but they recently announced on the Elixir Lang website the outreach
I
effort.
was just gonna say I hit my inbox this morning, and I
Yeah,
read the blog post from a couple days ago, the stipend
I think
program.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that the like just the way it was described will probably adjust over time to, for what's working, what's not working. Um, what I'm really curious about though is who, if anybody, has submitted yet. I've reached out to a few people that I thought would be good, and I encouraged them to submit. Whether or not they will or not, I just don't know.
mm-hmm.
Um, but beyond that, like let's say we have like a small group of like highly dedicated, like hyper engaging speakers. Where do they go? Where are the outlets now that are going to be the biggest windfalls in terms of getting the message out? What messages are going to resonate with audiences? And it seems again that everything is just hyper focused on AI at the moment. And so, like, if you're trying to bring, you have a whole generation of developers that traditionally that we want to engage with, like entry level developers, saying, you know, you should look at Elixir. You should consider this as like one of your tools in your belt.
Mm-hmm.
But if that whole generation now is like really even reconsidering whether they enter the job market as a software developer because of like generative AI, or if they are looking at, okay, what is the best generative AI tech stack? And it's not Elixir because
Right.
if you go to any of the LLMs at the moment, and if you just say, hey, build whatever, it's never going to choose Elixir.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you were to describe like the perfect use case for, I've tried this. Like if you say like build this as a distributed whatever, all hitting all of the fine points of Elixir, like all fault tolerant, like self-healing, distributed, blah blah blah, highly scalable. It doesn't choose Elixir, and this is because we're small. Like the LLMs tend to favor popularity, and
Mm-hmm.
so one of the larger existential questions I think that we have to answer is, can we overcome that? What's it going to take to overcome the like really kind of like the prison that the LLMs may put Elixir in? And it could very well be that the battle was lost years ago, and we're just now realizing it because of all these, all the training that's already happened. So there was a Elixir, like at ElixirConf EU, there was a meeting that took place. to really bring in some people that are core in the community and talk about adoption. And I wasn't able to attend because I was at Lambda Conf. The timing just, I was actually pretty like annoyed with myself because I really, really wanted to go to that meeting. But like it worked to like people broke out into small little groups and would discuss certain topics. And I spoke to a few people that were in attendance, and they all said the same thing, which is like the LLM discussion was the dominant one. Like there's definitely other things that came out from it, but you know, the right people are aware that this is a problem. But I don't, it's like really, really hard to predict the future right now in tech. Like I feel like at times that historically I've been able to see like which way things are going. And it's not like there's no question in my mind that like the LLMs are part of our future. But
Right.
like to what degree? Like
At
to
what
like
capacity? Is it a
at what
tool set
capacity?
or is it
Yeah,
replacement?
exactly. So we always I think software engineers tend to overprescribe our own ability to predict the future at times. Like we can see the potential of the technology, and then we start to react to that potential instead of the current reality. And yeah, the LLMs will continue to improve, but there's a lot of other factors at play. Um, the lack of any regulation at the moment, I think, will change. Like, there's just no way that society can even function if you're looking at like 30 to 40% unemployment rate. Like, if it's starting to just nuke
Right.
like white collar jobs, like there's only so much I think society is going to give these goddamn billionaires in terms of like their own libertarian like nightmare on just like, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to
Well,
replace all workers.
did you see like Microsoft just laid off like 7,000 people?
So I think the current rifts that have been occurring, I think, are in part certainly influenced by AI, but also we're kind of going back to pre-COVID standards, like in many ways in terms of employment numbers. Um, like COVID was just ridiculous, where there was just so much funny money going around. Companies were hiring like crazy. It really like the market just got juiced under won't get political, but Trump juiced the hell out of the market as he was leaving office. And this ends up having a short-term windfall, but long-term repercussions when you do that. Like you can't just throw all this free money into the market and then expect it to be used effectively. And so
Right.
when it's not used effectively, um, we will pay that price eventually, and we're starting to do so.
Mm.
However, in a normal, like historical market, we would be looking at this curve and just saying, like, expecting it to, okay, we're going to come back out of this at some point. But now with generative AI, everyone's like, wait a minute, we may not be coming back out of this. So, like that's really where a lot of people are kind of in this wait and see moment. Like even at DockYard, I mean, we've been feeling the pain just from the like, we're talent consultancy, right? And so if the market's up, we do well. If the market's down, we do poorly. That's just the way that talent consulting works. I've been in this business for 15 years at this point, and the roller coaster sucks, but you got to ride it. And so, like in the past, when we've had these up and down market swings, it's always been like, okay, yeah, we'll just see it through. But the talk right now is like, are we going to see it through? Like, we made it like one change towards AI. If you go to dockyard.com, it says like we're an AI studio, whatever. Like we just had to do it.
You just wanted that SEO.
I know. Well, it's not even SEO at this point. Majority of our leads are actually coming from LLMs. Like people
Oh,
are
okay, yeah.
citing like finding us through ChatGPT or whatever. And so that's a whole like
Well, what
ball
is that?
game.
I forget. I like Daniel Bergholtz. I had him on a couple weeks ago, and he was talking. I forget what it's called. It's like it's not SEO, but you can basically. What is the? You have like an LLM. He's tuning in, so maybe you can help me.
If there's like a marketing term for it, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, yeah. There's like a way to appeal to LLM searches, and I forget what it's called.
I mean that certainly is there. We rank well within most of this. I mean, I check them every now and then because the models are being updated from time to time. But I mean, it's exhausting, man. Like running a consultancy, I would not recommend it to many people because it is
So
like,
I did it for like 4 years. It was hard,
yeah,
man. I didn't like
it's
it.
well, you're constantly like hand to mouth,
Yeah.
and you're always about 3 to 6 months of going out of business.
Yep.
Product companies, they have a significantly longer runway, better margins. I mean, I chose to do this, and so I'm not like, saying anything. Uh, I'm not going kind of saying anything one way or the other. Just that in the sense that it's not a fun business during the downtimes. During the uptimes, it's great. And so if you want more of a kind of like a steady state in your career, you got to go product. If you don't mind the insanity of the up and downs of consulting, have at it. But it like this current one we're in, this is probably the worst one I've ever seen. Like I was an intern during the dot-com bubble back in 99, 2000. I was working at American Power Conversion. And I think that this is on the order of that in terms of how detrimental it was to it's just the sentiment of the market. Because when I worked today, so I was going to Province College, and I was working in APC's R&D lab in East Providence. And what I was doing was I was doing like firmware development, low level C, Microsoft Assembly on their smart cards. And their smart cards would plug into their batteries, and the batteries themselves would need to be monitored in a distributed fashion. And so I was writing the firmware for those cards on the system called Medusa. And I was actually, I mean, this is kind of relevant to my whole kind of tech career, but I was writing the system to distribute all the work in a language called Tickle, TCL. And I had written I'll just say it's like a crappy version of Rails in Tickle to look kind of like as a web interface. Like I built my own kind of, it wasn't an ORM, but it was at least like an abstraction above the SQL layer. I had built my own router, and I did all these things because I didn't read the Gang of Four book, but these just kind of like ideas like, oh, this makes sense as an abstraction. This makes sense as an abstraction. And then when Rails came about, I was like, oh, wow, like I immediately understand that.
Mhm.
But at APC at the time, like I was the intern. And so I came in one day to work, and I didn't have a chair anymore because they sold the chair and we couldn't get pencils because that was now an expense that they weren't. So like these companies during these down markets, like lock spending down big time. Cash is king. They try to find ways to conserve and also prevent cash from going out the door. And consulting as a business model is downstream of all that. And so, we get hit like really, really hard. So the kind of path towards out of this, I could on the one hand say, hey, we're going to go all in on AI. We're going to go like hard on AI. But it feels like we're chasing a trend in many ways.
Mhm.
And as much as you know, I see benefits of the language models, the kind of more pragmatist within me, understands that I've seen too many hype cycles in my career. And there's a lot of like hype cycle notes in what's happening
There
right now.
definitely are.
Yeah. And so like, it always comes down to the money. Like was it Millar or Miller? He and
I
I
think
kind of go
Malar,
back.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. He and I go back and forth on this on Twitter every now and then. Because he's a big AI advocate, and I think he's right about a lot of things. My kind of perspective is that if the money dries up, then we're going to see a lot of these companies implode.
One thing that I have trouble wrapping my head around, and it might just be like maybe I'm not smart enough and I'm not grasping the full picture,
Mm,
but like th- you have these like large AI models, right, that are consuming enormous amount of energy where they're talking about like creating nuclear power plants to support it. That doesn't
exactly.
seem like something that you can just keep doing, right? I don't think that has long term, like it's not going to work. There's a ceiling that
Yeah.
you're going to hit.
Well, so if we were to look at this as like a purely free market capitalist, what they would probably say is that this is great for the world, great for energy, and great for sustainability because it's going to incentivize these companies to find cheaper energy, like cheaper ways to produce energy.
Hmm.
But what we're really seeing is that you have these goddamn like web application companies going out and buying decommissioned nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's insane. Like this is literally like Bond villain stuff. Like that's like Bond
Right.
villain. There was a Bond villain like in I think was it Blofeld? He was like in a
It
decommissioned nuclear
just it
power
doesn't
plant
seem
somewhere.
sustainable to me. Like it doesn't
Well,
seem
at some point the money is going to talk, right? It's going to be, you're going to have the investment class. So I listen to a lot of like financial like analysis podcasts because I run a business. Understanding what the markets are doing is important. And one of the biggest issues that we've certainly seen in the past like couple of years, couple of decades, is the rise of private equity and its influence on the market, and really how private equity doesn't give a shit about like anything other than just making money.
right.
And yeah,
They
they,
don't
they
care
don't.
about your company. They don't care about the idea. They just care about
Yeah,
10xing, right?
exactly. So like if they get a whiff that their returns are not coming, they're gonna find a way to. They're gonna do like they're gonna put leverage on your company. They're going to find a way to extract their value out as much as they can and cut their losses. So
Hmm.
right now, like what we see from all these AI company leaders is the same. They're like they go out and they give you the like sky is falling warning. AI is coming. It's going to replace your jobs. And the people that are saying that the loudest are always the ones that directly benefit from it.
I was just gonna
And
say the
yeah,
people you see on X and all these social media, you click on their profile and they're building AI products.
yeah, exactly. And so,
Yeah.
but I mean, there's something to be said about like, of course they are because they believe in it. Yes, but you also can see how the market responds. When the Nvidia CEO gets out there and says, "Oh, we're gonna, it's gonna wipe out all these jobs," or was it the Anthropic CEO? We see like the sentiment, like of that message going out influence the investments. And so, despite the fact that there are no returns for these companies yet, in a really like they're operating at significant loss leaders.
Hmm.
Um, the pricing of access to these language models is heavily subsidized at the moment. Like
Right.
think about it this way: if like let's play this out to its logical conclusion. If the language model itself is adequate to replace a developer or a team of developers, and the average developer salary in the United States, let's say like a mid to like senior, you're looking at like six figure to like 150, 200, maybe higher sometimes. You
Hmm.
could say like, a decent team of 5 to 10 developers, you're looking at like $500,000 to $1 million annual. But the replacement is $20 a month. Like,
Yeah.
there's right now they're getting us addicted to the drug.
I was just gonna
And
say, and then they're gonna creep the price up to where you can't afford not to pay it.
well, not only can you not afford not to pay it, there won't be another option
Mm.
because when I was, learning to drive, I had a book of maps in my car. I had streets memorized. I don't know the streets of my town anymore
No,
because of Google
same,
Maps.
dude.
Like, yeah. And so
Sometimes
like
I don't
if
even remember my address because there's too many numbers in it. It's like, and it's just like, dude, this is pathetic.
yeah, and so if we like once we rely upon the machine, we tend to it's just human nature. Like we tend to like deallocate that part of our brain that had all of that knowledge because like, oh, we don't need to like store this anymore.
I
And
mean, at a
so
basic example, it's like calculator and mental math, right? Like I can
yeah.
barely do any mental math anymore.
Well, so what I started doing is I don't want to promote like products in here, but I was using, I still do. I use one of the like online learning tools, and I've been going back through like basic math up through like more advanced math, and I'll restart it every 3 months
Yeah, yeah.
because as much as I sucked at math at high school, and I've been able to like skate by in my software development career without like as a web developer, we don't really need to know math sometimes. Um, I think in this AI world, like that is not going to continue. I
Yeah.
can run the AI to to solve the math for me, but I want to understand like how it works under the hood. And so getting deep on like matrix math and all these kind of like really like kind of goes into probability, like how this stuff is working. I'd like to understand it at a deeper level. And so I got to bone up on my math. But anyway, the kind of like the shoe that could be dropping at some point is number one, private equity as a business model is kind of reaching a problematic point. So if you go back to like the early 80s, guess how many private equity firms existed in the United States in like 1983?
Oh gosh, I don't even know.
24.
Wow. Okay.
How many exist now?
Thousands,
Tens of
hundreds.
thousands.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tens of thousands. And they are all trying to find
A
like,
unicorn.
oh, well, no, they're not looking for unicorns. What a lot of them are looking for are small businesses that they can consolidate, put leverage buyouts against, like dismantle, increase prices, all
You
these
know
things.
what's interesting is I have a buddy, like super good, like salesman type guy. He's part of this startup. They're onboarding like trades and brick and mortar small businesses onto their software with the intention of like buying out their assets so they don't have to like quote unquote worry about them in the future. And
Yeah,
it's like a whole business model. It's wild.
it's it's out of control. I mean, I don't want to go down the road of like all of my like political positions on how this shit should be illegal, but it's just out of control because it has led to massive inflation, it has led to massive job loss. You know, those in the financial sector will cry all day long about how they're just like they're exposing unhealthy like companies. But what they're really their goal is not to provide value. Their goal is not to well, so their goal is not to build value for society. Their goal is not to actually produce a product. Their goal is just to make a return. And so that's the mentality that these people work under. These are the same people that are funding, by and large, a lot of the AI companies. And so if private equity like leveraged positions, like a lot of these PE firms, they're not just all in on AI. They have a diverse portfolio.
Mhm.
So what PE is starting to run into is there aren't many other businesses to buy up at this point. Like there's only so many dentist offices that they can buy. There's only so many like veterinarian clinics that they can buy. There's only so many hospitals they can buy. Um, they have torn through as many as they can, or like almost as many as they can. And so there is very little ground for them to be going after. They're going to end up, a lot of these PE firms are going to have significant toxic assets on their
Mhm.
portfolio.
Well, you
And
saw it during COVID too, where they're just scooping up single family homes as well. And
that is of all the things they do, that should be illegal. Like
yeah,
you shouldn't, because they're trying to turn everybody into a renter's class.
yep,
And
yep.
that's a huge problem. Like you see, like here in Massachusetts, they passed this. We have the MBTA, which is a commuter rail. They passed a zoning law that any towns within a certain like mileage from a commuter rail stop has to increase their housing by a certain percentage. And a lot of these towns don't have land left anymore. And so, you know, you have a town like mine, which is all single family homes, and it's changing the nature of the town to comply with this regulation because now they're having to put up like condos, multifamily homes. And that drastically changes just like even the makeup of the town. Um, However, what was never discussed was get rid of people's second homes. Get rid of like all these PE firms that are buying up all these houses and putting them on the rental market at significant value. Like there was a lot of things that they could have done to decrease housing pressure without having to put this other burden upon the local communities. And this is happening everywhere. Like Vancouver, I think is a like the most crazy example is that there was like less than 1% of the population that was born in Vancouver that can afford to live in Vancouver
Mm,
because the amount, you know, there's a lot of overseas money that was coming in, buying up properties, not living in them just because housing was always guaranteed to go up.
right.
And you know, when you look at these things as being investments instead of being like a means for people's way of life, like a house should have a family in it. A house should be like where people feel safe. A house should be where it shouldn't be like I'm going to flip this. I'm going to buy
I
it up
don't
and
know.
flip.
I have a hard time, like, because I believe in like a little like free market, and obviously, like, I want investments and investment properties. So, like, I see like both sides. I see your angle
You know,
too.
here's the thing though. You live in Utah. Utah is just like land for as far as the eye can see. I live south of Boston, and we are so crunched on top of one another.
Yeah.
Like so one thing I've always felt, and this is like going back to the COVID stuff, like the whole like masking rule or the mandate was nuts because you're applying a mandate upon a population that 380 million people, and everyone's in different situations. Like people that are on top of each other in the city versus someone that lives in a farm and his nearest neighbor's 2 miles away. Like you can't have these like one rule like fits.
Right. You can't.
Yeah, and the
Which
same
is
thing
why
goes,
you have local government, right? So you adapt a
you
little
should.
bit.
You should.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going like way off the topic
We
here.
are. We're
I'm gonna try to bring us back now because I
we've
want
rabbit holed.
the AI stuff. But like it goes to like the nature of like, okay, should a housing like a limit on the number of houses a entity should own, should that apply to a highly dense area and maybe a sparse area equally? And probably not. Like I think in highly dense like housing areas or highly dense populated areas, there should be probably different expectations and different laws that apply because the situations are completely different from one another. Like you can't have, and this is what gets people upset. It's like they're now living under a rule that makes no sense to them.
Mm-hmm.
But for those that it does make sense to, they're like, yeah, of course you should do it. It just puts us at odds with each other. It's so stupid. So to bring this now back, because we've lost probably half the audience.
Yeah, Jeremy just goes, how about that Elixir adoption? LOL.
Yeah. So like the PE stuff is important here because if they end up having to pull their money out, like if the money ends up, you're going to see a lot of these like bubbles happen, like they're like a slow boil and then they pop and it's just gonna be like domino, 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 domino. And so perhaps that is the outcome that we're looking at in a year or two. I don't know, but I think it's really hard to bet on it. And so we can't bet on we can't like as Elixir developers, we can't bet on, okay, we don't need to be so afraid of the LLM like monster that we can just wait for it to pop. So I think that we have to be reactionary to a certain degree, and we have to actually like what Zach Daniel is doing. I think they just released yesterday.
His Ash AI stuff?
No. The usage, was it usage rules?
I might have just saw a post from him actually.
Yeah. So if you go on Hex, it's a package he put out, which I think is just like a collection of just readmes. I don't know. I think there's a mixed task in there.
Okay.
But like what he's kind of pushing is this usage rules document that you can include with your library that would give your library better instructions. Sorry, it would give the LLM better instructions on how to utilize your library properly.
Yeah,
because what we're
seeing, cool.
Because what we're seeing, like absolutely, is that if you just go to like a regular LLM and not like train it before, like not give it more context beforehand, either with Tidewave or I guess these usage rules now, and you just straight up say, if you're going to raw dog it, and you're just going to say like raw dog LLM, give me Elixir, give me that, it's going to write poor Elixir because the amount of things it has previously trained upon is very low compared to other languages. And I like the thing that I'm concerned about is without these, with that lower level of training, is this going to further people's perception on Elixir and make adoption more difficult? Right. So like a lot of the things that came out of that adoption summit was around like, how do we play more nicely with the LLMs? How do we like, I guess, what should
we got Zach tuning in. He just says it great. Imports usage rules defined in the packages.
Yeah. So I think that's a great idea. I'm going to look at bringing that into some of my libraries. I think that what we should probably be doing as a community, as an effort, is going out and finding libraries that don't have something like that in there.
Sometimes I don't think Zach is a real person. I feel like he gets way too much stuff accomplished.
But it's like if these usage rules or something like it is going to help close that gap on making the LLMs effective for Elixir, then it's upon us as a community to go and be like Johnny Appleseed in bringing those usage rules to as many of the key libraries as possible, hopefully as many libraries as possible, or potentially having some sort of central repository where there's community generated ones for particular libraries that we can share. One thing that I actually saw that I want to do for LiveView Native um, is someone suggested, it might have been Thomas that suggested this, is like point an LLM at your documentation, like a MCP documentation, and actually have it try to implement your library, and then have it tell you the areas where it's confused about. And I want to do that exercise because I want to see, like, as the writer of a library, and a lot of other developers like have the same problem. We have issues with like getting our own thoughts out of our head into the documentation sometimes, because we end up leaving a lot of things unsaid because we take it for granted. And so I like watching other people try to go through my libraries so I can find out where those things are, but perhaps the LLMs can actually assist with that as well. So there's a lot of kind of things in the works right now, I feel like, on the adoption front. The traditional means of adoption, I don't think should be forgotten, but like what I want to see is I don't know where the effective conferences to go to at this point. I don't know where the effective, like, more traditional lanes to speak at are at this point. And I'm the one that was pushing, as like even up till like a month or two ago, heavily on getting out and going to speak at the conferences. But it's tricky. It's really, really hard. In the Elixir Slack, Dave, I'm going to butcher his last name. Let me look it up real quick because I want to give him credit for doing so.
I butcher names constantly. You know that best.
But it's Dave Aronson. So he has been doing the I'd say thankless effort of every single week curating a list of conferences that aren't necessarily Elixir related conferences, but like conferences that people don't speak at.
That was put in the.
It was cited in the
too, right?
Yeah. And so Dave has been doing this every single week, and every single week he'll say, "Is anybody paying attention to this? Like, should I keep doing it?" And I always try to just like give him feedback because I want him to keep doing it because I think it's important to have that list.
Yeah, it is.
I want him to feel like he's just not talking into an echo chamber.
In fact, I'll put that link in the description afterwards too, because it's a good list.
So it's like it used to be far easier, I feel like, to get these ideas out there, but there's other factors at play too on the adoption side of stuff that I feel like can still be addressed. So one of the things that I've really come around to on after the last Elixir Conf in August, I actually spent about 2 months. I put it out on Twitter, I put it on Blue Sky or wherever. And I said, hey, if you have concerns about Elixir adoption, or if you have a story to tell, if you tried to get Elixir adopted at your company, or your company moved away from Elixir, like, DM me, I want to talk to you. And I spoke with a ton of people. A lot of the people had stories that had a lot of overlap with one another. And one of the biggest pieces of overlap that was consistent regardless of startup, regardless of enterprise company, and no one said this specifically, but kind of like the conclusion I drew was that Elixir is awesome at making the hard things easy. And that is absolutely true. Like doing a real-time distributed system, all this stuff, like that's hard things to solve. Presence is a hard problem to solve that we get out of the box. Where Elixir has been deficient is that it makes the easy things hard. And I had a hard time kind of reconciling that and accepting
I'm curious.
it.
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, what do you mean?
So where it comes down to is that, and so when people were saying Elixir, and I would ask them, I was like, what about the language makes it? And it's not the language, just like if I want to get an application out the door tomorrow, I can go to React and I can just like cobble a bunch of things together that exist. With Elixir, I gotta roll my own, and so it's really just a matter of how easy was it to get from zero to launch with a given tech stack.
I feel I feel the opposite. I feel like it's easier to get like an MVP out the door.
I feel the same way too. Like personally, if I'm launching a product, I'm choosing Elixir. But I've also been working Elixir since like 2013. And so it's, for people that are coming to Elixir for the first time, for people that are like proficient in another language, in another tech stack, I feel like the entry level experience is, there's a disconnect that exists there. There's things that they're expecting that they're not getting, like the language server is one example. I think that language server is just table stakes at a for anyone that is especially entry level in a language
Hmm.
nowadays. Um, and and this has been an ongoing issue for Elixir for quite some time. I know we have, the consolidated effort, but then we have those three language servers are continuing to develop independently. And I'm not really sure what the story is there. Like what we were promised when that blog post first came out was that there was going to be communication with the community over a Twitter account. Um, and I know that there was a presentation at, I think, a Code Beam recently. And I'm hoping that we get really good things because the people involved are smart and they're all dedicated towards it. But like the optics of it right now is that it just feels like it's kind of uh on the wayside, or like maybe there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes that's
I
just
feel
not
like, yeah, I
public.
haven't seen any updates with
Yeah,
since like the main announcement, right?
and I'm pretty plugged into Elixir, and so like for
Yeah.
but so now, like, try to do it from the perspective of those that are coming to Elixir for the first time. They don't know that there's this other effort happening. They'll go and search for like a language server, and Elixir LS has gotten much better. I've been using it in NeoVim for the past like 2 months, and I've been fairly happy with it. But it's still like missing, like some things are not, if you go over to another language server, I got JS or TypeScript one, right? Um, and that's where you're coming from. That's kind of like your expectation. Like, what is the experience of interfacing with this language server? And so it's just like it can feel lackluster at times. However, now, and so like let's put that in the context of today. Are language servers even really necessary in the world of generative AI? Like what Chris McCord demonstrated at ElixirConf EU, Phoenix New, um, like that's as fast as you're going to get, as far as like, other than just making the LM smarter and not
I
having
mean,
like
yeah,
do as
just
many
like
retries.
auto completion and suggestions are, it's pretty much what the language server, well, I mean, on steroids, right? And it
Yeah, I
doesn't
mean,
crash on you and stop working. And then,
right. And so, is that where, so if it'd be nice to talk to somebody that is like maybe a year into their job and just kinda understanding, like, especially if they're heavily using, AI, like, are they even leveraging language servers at this point? Are they just, heavily leveraging LLMs? So, but I think this goes back to a larger trend that I feel like we've been kinda stuck in Elixir at times, is we tend to chase, like, it's like, okay, like, language servers weren't originally there, and now we have to add a language server. Elixir doesn't have, AI capabilities, we're gonna add that. And so it's kinda like filling gaps that get exposed because we don't have something. But from a adoption perspective, filling these gaps is not necessarily a good adoption strategy. It's a good retention strategy because it's like, okay, I'm already using Elixir, and oh, I need this, but Elixir doesn't have it, so I guess I have to stop using Elixir. I'm going to go over to this other stack to use it, and now you kind of like, that tech stack has a foot in the door with your organization. But if Elixir has it, you can stay in the Elixir stack and stay happy. But as far as an adoption strategy goes, what ends up working better for adoption is differentiation. And so, vision, like these things that are really kind of geared towards an opinionated perspective on the way that software should be built. And nothing speaks better to that than OTP. Like OTP is a heavily, heavily opinionated perspective on how to build applications, especially applications at scale. And so if we have this differentiator that exists already, then, and differentiators are what's important towards adoption. What are we not doing right in order to communicate, in order to educate, to get people on board with wrapping their mind around how this works? That's like the big question we have to answer. That, going back to what I said earlier, with Francesco, has, I mentioned that they've been kind of struggling with this in the early community for decades. It's not an easy question to answer clearly, because if there was an answer, it would have been out there by now. Um, I mean, there's a few people out there that I feel like are just amazing at communicating these values outside of like those that are in the bubble. Sasha Urich is probably number one in his
Yeah,
just
for sure.
to be able to take these fairly complex concepts and put them into a bite-sized package where people just like can munch on them all day long. Like he's fantastic at that. But we only have one Sasha Urich, and he lives over, he lives over in Europe. We can't expect him to show up at every single conference. So, like, could this come about with the outreach effort, where perhaps the individuals that are on the outreach team or get approved for it, or I'm not really sure what the selection process is. Could they just be compelling speakers that are working alongside some of these people, like maybe a Sasha, where Sasha can say, like, here are my thoughts on like what would be compelling for people. That's where, like, if we're working together on these things and we're collaborating to actually create the most compelling content and putting it out there, that's where I feel like we could really start to make a significant dent in the adoption effort. So all I have to say, like, one trend I've seen in Elixir over time is that it's a lot of like lone wolves. And I think that we need to work as a pack instead of individually. We need to be working together and collaborating on not just the communication side of it, but also across projects. It's something that a company, like, if we're comparing, like, I'll use an example that's personal to me, which is LiveView Native. And so LiveView Native is not part of the LiveView core team at all. And we have undoubtedly been slow to market because there are things that we can't get into LiveView. We have to, spend months working around. And these would be like simple things to get into LiveView, and we're just not seeing eye to eye on a lot of them. To the point where I have seriously considered forking the effort because it's costing too much money and there's too much wasted time, like waiting and praying that I can get things in the LiveView that just aren't coming. Compare that to like React and React Native. These are two teams there's people on both core teams. They're both under the same company. They're all like rowing in the same direction. And so, regardless of whether or not we have like the best potential solutions, we're going to get smoked if we're not all working together.
Yeah, if we're all siloed in our own projects.
Yeah, exactly. And so like we have this like advantage that we're a grassroots community by and large, because people choose Elixir and stay with Elixir, I feel like, because they're passionate about the language, they're passionate about the tech stack. And so we need to find a way to pull that together, to work together more. The EEF is a good vehicle for doing so. And it's not to say people are not open to collaboration, just that it's felt more like it's been waiting for Jose or Chris to give us things at times, or waiting for, I mean, maybe people are waiting on LiveView Native. It's
lots of people are waiting on that. Come on.
I mean, it's like there's a lot of downstreaminess that exists at the moment, and perhaps those people that are downstream don't feel like they're empowered to actually step up and do these things. And I would encourage people to do so. Like, it doesn't cost you anything to publish the hex. It doesn't matter if there's another library out there that Elixir core team member, is doing. Go out and put your own version out. That's the best way to learn. Find ways to expand the utility of it. The recent what was it, Daisy UI, like bringing that into Phoenix, I thought was a great idea. We've had this now, like, seeming some uptick of like component libraries for Phoenix. These are going to help with the initial like application building experience. A lot of the stuff that Zach's been working on, if you want to kind of split it down the middle in terms of, like, I would say, even though they're highly intermingled, but Ash and Igniter, like, I'd say are probably like, Igniter doesn't require Ash, in other words, right? So like they're kind of separate projects in many ways, but like the Ash ecosystem being like a low code solution, I think is definitely something that we need to be pushing more of. Igniter to like really kind of reduce the a lot of your own like code generation is fantastic. And so we have all these kind of like seeds in place, and it's just a matter of like, how do we turn up the volume?
I think there's a lot of awesome stuff with Ash, and Zach is coming on in a couple weeks, and I'm excited. And like recently, like with his book, I've been like learning it better. And I caught in the comments he said that with AI, he's been taking a lot of his like forum questions and turning them into documentation. So he's like
Oh,
20x
interesting.
documentation, which is a really good idea because I
Like
feel
a
like
FAQ or more of like a
I think
actual.
more actual documentation, like how to actually
Okay.
use Ash, which is cool. Um, and like I just built a little like side project using Ash, and I got things up and running so quickly. Like I'm excited. I've been planning a course, and I'm gonna get one out. Like, because I think like my angle with my content is like a lot of beginner focus, but like
Hmm.
still produce a project. Like get started
Yeah, but that's
quickly, build
important.
something cool. Yeah.
So the biggest, like one of the most successful, uh, it's like Rails was like in a very unique position because we had very little competition. There was like Java, PHP, CGI. There really wasn't much in terms of other tech stacks, but you had a lot of people that were doing a lot of independent like adoption and marketing efforts. And one of them was called Railscasts. And I wish I can remember that. I think his first name was Ryan. I forget, but it was just like 5 minute short little videos and like a single topic. It was like very, very short. Like, here's how we do memoization, or here's how you do like an active record lookup. And there's been like this big kind of swing in content creation towards long form content, like as we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wonder if there's like an appetite now because like people tend like audiences and populations tend to there's definitely like a movement towards what the
Ryan
predominant.
Bates is his name.
Ryan Bates, yeah.
Yeah.
um and is there an appetite now for shorter form content? Like if we're inundated with all this long form content, we were just talking about earlier how like there's not enough time in the day to even listen to all the podcasts I
Uh,
want to listen to. But is there a place for like, here's a 2 minute video on just this one hyper focused topic, and you can pump those out so easily. So like there was a couple of efforts after Railscast to like do X casts, like it was like Ember casts or React casts, whatever. Like everyone kind of had like a something cast clone for a while. I don't know if anyone ever did it with Elixir.
I
Um,
feel like I'm blanking. I just had him on.
let's look it up. Elixir casts.
Uh, Herman, Herman.
Oh, Herman. Yeah, yeah. So he used to be in Boston. Oh, there is an
So
Elixir
he
cast one.
he does a lot of short videos that
Yeah,
like
yeah,
are like 1 minute to 2 minute of like
exactly.
really knowledgeable things, and I
Yeah,
love that form. I think it's really smart.
yeah. And that's actually like Herman's like a really good example of doing that because it's not just a matter of putting out a few videos. You have to be consistent over time, long
It's
period of
hard to
time.
make
Yeah,
content, man. Let me
it
tell you.
is. Content is not easy. Like I sit on the board of a couple of organizations near me, and like they're like some are selling related, and so it's always like, how do we get more people? Like, oh, we got to do social media, and so like you have all these people that don't understand that content creation is a job. Like it's
Mhm.
work. It's not easy. And they just think it's. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we can throw an AI agent at like some of the social media content creation now,
Well, like
but
I can clip up my long form stuff with AI and automation tools, but
yeah,
like still
yeah,
creating the actual content is hard.
yeah.
I've never worked
Um,
harder for free in my life. And then I started my YouTube channel.
And I haven't paid myself in a year and a half, so I've been working my ass off and free for for quite some time. Um, but the like the kind of there's something that, like I don't think we should always be mimicking the past either. Like I kind of there's things that worked in that time period that may not be effective now. And so, I mentioned that with the conferences, I mentioned it with the meetups. They may not be as effective as they are because people's appetite for going in person is not what it was. Because back then, that was your only option, right? There weren't these live streaming like this, and so that's something that we got to figure out. Like, where are the most effective avenues to get our messaging, our content out to?
Yeah.
We're fortunate that two of the biggest tech streamers, both Theo and Primogen, are very favorable towards Elixir, but they also have a million other things to talk about. Like Theo's channel is
Right.
primarily React stuff, and then Primogen dabbled with it, I think, back in December, and has said he wants to come back to it. Tej, who is like probably in like top 5 like tech streamers, he's on the NeoVim team. Like once a month, he's always like doing a stream where he's writing Elixir, and so there's all these kind of people that are in the orbit of the right people that love Elixir already. And
Right.
so like, how do we leverage that? How do we actually like, or is it more of like the problem is in the reverse? Like, do they need Elixir to get more popular before they talk about it some more? And that's, I think, a valid point because
I
their
think the
channels are so
problem
large.
is they want views, right? Like they're
Yeah,
making
exactly.
their income off of content creation. And like I know for a fact if I wasn't just in the niche of Elixir, my channel would probably be more popular, right?
Oh yeah, you could
But
do
I made
AI
that
channel.
decision because I was like, no, we need people that just focus on Elixir. I think it's
Yeah,
important. But I probably would have, 20,000 followers if I threw in some JavaScript or React stuff from time to time as well, because I think they're just not seeing the views when they have Elixir in their content.
right. And that brings you back to like, what is the draw towards Elixir? Because if we're just gap filling things that exist in other spaces, right? Then there isn't a differentiator that really exists on like from a library perspective that is like enough of a draw to say like, oh, we gotta make the change. We have to
Oh,
move over
Andrew
to Elixir.
Stewart makes a good point too. He also says like Elixir has basically like zero entry level work out there. So you're going to have less
Yeah.
people consuming our content that are learning.
That actually is a huge problem. And I think that this is purely a cultural one. Because Elixir has drawn so many senior people, those teams by and large are looking to hire other senior people. They're looking to hire peers. And we have seen, I have not seen another tech stack that is this allergic to hiring juniors than I've
Yeah.
seen elsewhere.
I
It's
like my current team at Collects. I work with just super, super smart dudes, and that's
yeah.
it. It's like, it's wild.
I mean, it's almost where it. I mean, not to say there's a concerted effort to ignore juniors, but the counterpoint could be that because Elixir requires less people, like that just could be where the financials like land, right? Like
Right.
in a
Yeah, you
company
have a
that's
smaller
using.
team, but you still need the expertise of a senior to deploy
Yeah,
and get everything out the door.
exactly. So but if it's like a React team, like yeah, there's going to be a lot of like junior level work to do
Hmm.
that you're going to need to hire for, and those junior level people can tear
And who
through it. But
can like I can't remember how to center a div, so have a junior guy do it.
oh no, you have the LLM do it now.
Oh, that's
The
true.
but in Elixir, like you just don't need these team sizes, and when you have a smaller team, you have you have a higher concentration of senior people, and so this could just be a byproduct of that possibly. I think that there is a. I mean, it's almost like, are we foot gunning ourselves by not bringing in junior people eventually? Because I think that
I think it's a problem tech worldwide at this point.
yeah,
Because you're just starting to see like job descriptions for just senior level, right? And what happens if we have zero juniors on all of our teams and then the senior guys retire? No one taught those juniors how to do things right.
yeah. Well, there's I mean that now you're getting to like the crux of the problem with AI too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that too.
Because
Yep.
AI is largely going to be targeting junior positions regardless of tech stack. And so
Right.
all those junior React positions, junior Python positions, whatever Ruby positions are going to be the most heavily affected by this. And that situation you just described is likely going to be happening in a lot of companies where they're carving the bottom out. Maybe the AI gets to the point where they aren't going to find themselves in that position, but I'm not sure yet. So I do I do like these are all like questions that I have. Everything that we've talked about for like roughly the past 90 minutes, like these are all questions where my mind is gone, like potential solutions. But I don't see a good way towards mass Elixir adoption without a significant differentiator that Elixir, like that's really kind of like this is Elixir's thing. This is what separates it. You get an order of magnitude like benefit from it, and it's not really something you can do in another tech stack.
You know what I think I need to do is just I need to take Ash, create like some amazing SaaS Stripe integrated application, right? Where someone can take the same idea and make it into their own product. And, you know, 10 hours of work, you have a SaaS product you could deploy and start making money with.
We built some of those out within DockYard. We had this internal project called I forget the name of it, but it was basically that. It was a way that we could actually code gen like the basics of a SaaS product. But I had some constraints upon it because I saw this in other tech stacks where you would find that the kind of like SaaS baseline application that were like some consultancies were building around was so constrained that if you wanted to build on top of it, like say like you built my MVP for like $50,000, whatever it was. Now, if you want to take it beyond MVP, you got some investment money, you proved it out. These like SaaS based kind of like starter kits were so constrained, you effectively had to throw the whole thing out and start over from scratch. And so one of the constraints I had on us doing this was that we would not put our clients in that position. Like it should always be something that was going to be code that you can build on top of. And so it was largely like you know running mixed tasks to, I mean, kind of what Igniter does, I believe now, but like mixed tasks to generate into your project or generate a new project and actually bring all this code in with tests so that you can build on top of it, as opposed to everything sitting in a library or like a Rails engine or something.
You know, like funny enough, like right as like Igniter came out, I was building like I built kind of my own version of Beacon, and then Beacon gave me a lot of really good ideas because I was like, well, because I was still doing the consultancy thing and it was hard, and like most of my work ended up being all these stupid landing pages and websites. And I was like, well, I don't want to say no because I need income coming in, but like how can I make my life more interesting? So I ended up making my own like website hosting platform with Phoenix with like dynamic routing and things. And I made a bunch of templates that we would use for specific industries, whether it was like plumbing, electrical, roofing, whatever it was. And we would just code generate these templates, but it put it directly into the project so you could still edit them.
Yeah. Beacon's actually, I mean, it's unfortunately, it's another example of a project that I'm not going to say I failed to bring to market because I still want to continue to develop it.
Dude, I love Beacon. I think it's one of the best projects out there.
We just kind of came up against financial constraints and I couldn't continue to fund the development. Like it was actually, I don't think a lot of people know this, but the development of Beacon was actually more costly month to month than LiveView Native was.
Dang.
So it was a high cost. And
well, you had big hitters working on that project too.
Yeah, I mean, we have an awesome visual interface, and we have plans. We have the kind of like the framework of almost creating like a lovable with Beacon, so you can just use LLM to like content generate like within Beacon. It's not implemented, but it's like the framework has been architected. Like the concept has been architected at least. Or rather, so that it's in a concept form. It's in a gist. All right. So it's not written in code, but like that was going to be the next step. And then like, we were just looking at the outcome of just a consulting business drying up. It's just like,
Zach goes, I don't like the code gen strategy, to be honest, despite building Igniter.
Well, I mean, I think that the code gen strategy is almost antiquated now with the LLM stuff.
I agree.
That's just where things are going to go. And now this was like 4 years ago that we were working on that cogen stuff. But the Beacon story is another sore spot for me where I make honest efforts to try to invest in these things, and we can't get it out fast enough, or it's not catching on fast enough. I mean, the thing that really kind of was the driving point was that we saw zero uh, like business coming in for Beacon usage. And so we have to be incentivized in that. We can't continue to just fund something at the tune of like hundreds of thousands of dollars per year,
Right.
and then not see any ROI on it.
Right.
And so and I think that's not like a judgment on the Elixir community. It's just that we didn't get it to that point where I feel like that was going to start to happen. Now, all that being said, unfortunately, like it was, announced on social media and it's public knowledge, but Leandro, we had, part of that falling out, or the financial kind of drying up on it, that we had to part ways with Leandro. And then just like 3 weeks ago, we actually got like a legitimate, very good Beacon lead. And so it's like always this kick in the butt where we try to make decisions in the moment sometimes because we're forced to.
Yeah.
And then I tried to hold on as long as I could. I probably kept that project going at least 3 months longer than it was really a smart idea too, from the financial perspective.
Which is hard, like, because one, you
really
don't want to
hard.
let go a good engineer,
Well,
and you actually
it's
believe in the project.
But then I have like, people within DockYard in my management team that are constantly hounding me like, we can't keep doing this. We can't keep doing this. I'm like, just give it a little bit more time. And then, we kind of, brought the project down, and then just a few weeks after we get a lead. And so it's just like, God damn it. Like things don't line up sometimes, unfortunately. But like, I actually still believe in the project big time, because I think that, to your point, we need a good first class like content management solution in the Phoenix application. It shouldn't be, just relying upon WordPress.
Do you not like? I feel like you could easily turn that into a pretty awesome like SaaS platform, though. And
that was that's still my intent. I want to do a cloud-based Beacon host, but what we were lacking to get there was like the first kind of like entry level thing would just be like hosting blogs, right? And so like Beacon's visual page builder is really good for building marketing pages. It's not great for building content pages.
Oh, you know what you need to do is make a funnel, like click funnels, like landing pages and form signups. And
well, that's where like doing like a lovable type clone would work out well for that. And so I'm not going to divulge who the client is, because we're still chatting with them. We're gonna do what we can to help them as much as possible. But they came to us because they also had this idea of like a lovable type thing. They want to take it in a different direction than what we've talked about internally. Like what we've talked about internally is pretty much exactly what Lovable does. Like build a like marketing website with Beacon, like through a command prompt. And so it's not necessarily a conflict of interest. Just that it's like nearly at that point. Like it's what would kill me. And I'm kind of like, it's probably not a good idea to say this on a podcast. What would kill me is if someone independently did it, and like we just like funded 90% of their startup costs for the development of Beacon. But that's always a risk you take with open source. Yeah. It's, there's no guarantees that.
Well, it's one of those things. Like I've talked about this a lot too. Like I joke and kind of laugh, like how many people want you to sign NDAs before they tell you their $1 million idea, right? But the truth of it is you need some motivation behind an idea to make it actually successful.
Well, no one believes in your idea as much as you, right?
Right, exactly.
And the nowadays, especially, the investment class is not interested in investing in ideas. They want to invest in a functional business that's actually generating revenue. They typically have a requirement of seeing about 10 million ARR before they even talk about investment. They want to invest in scale. They don't want to invest in like getting the application out the door. Unless you're doing AI, because then you can put out your own code editor with your own language model integration, and then have billions of dollars shower. What was Windsurf's like turnaround time? It was like less than a year, right? Where
I'm not sure. I'm sure it's something crazy though.
Yeah. The irony there, like the thing that just still I find hilarious, is that OpenAI got like a couple $1 billion from Microsoft, and then they gave that money to Windsurf which is a VS Code fork. And so it's like I think
it's a circle jerk of funding.
Yeah, exactly. So like it's somewhere out there. Like after the Windsurf investment, Microsoft announced like some sort of like lockdown of VS Code. Like there was a change in VS Code's like terms of use, or something changed. Like they made an announcement that felt like it was very reactionary to the reality that they just like gave away billions of dollars to a competitor of one of their products inadvertently. But that's what happens in a fast moving like market, like AI. Like AI world right now feels very much the way that the .com world felt back in the early 2000s, where it's just like there's a lot of loss, there's a lot of grifts, but at the same time, there's a lot of potential.
Well, I think we see it with everything like .com, blockchain, NFTs, AI. Yep. I mean,
well, that's what I'm saying. I've been through multiple hype cycles at this point, and so I see the trends. And AI has a lot of hype cycle notes in it. And so, when I say hype cycle, I'll be clear. I'm not saying that AI doesn't have value. It's just that these, in tech, we tend to like run the dog really, really fast.
The problem is we push solutions, or we push the tech into solutions that don't necessarily need it. Because you saw that with blockchain. Like I think blockchain has a lot of benefits and is really cool, but we can't just add blockchain to everything.
Well, that's what they did, right?
Right. They tried.
there was and they're doing with AI right now. I tweeted this out maybe 2 weeks ago. There was a screen cover for an iPhone, like a screen, like a screen protector you put on an iPhone, and it had a sticker on the box saying like optimized for AI.
Oh yeah, I think I saw that post.
How is that optimized for AI? Because it's going to probably sell. Some idiot's going to buy it.
Like, oh wow, my screen cover is optimized for AI.
And I said something like, oh, we're not in a hype cycle at all. Like it's something very ironic in that way. So I wonder, maybe now, maybe we should transition over to the questions.
We do have a lot of good questions.
Yeah. So for those that are watching, we put out like a request for questions from people, and I'll do my best to answer them. And Jacob, I think you should answer. I think we should both answer and give our perspective.
Yeah. I think like there's good conversation around all of these, honestly.
Yeah.
So I kind of categorized them from like getting started and initial adoption. I think we'll start there and kind of work through. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll try to be a bit more brief, because I feel like the past 90 minutes, I could have said it in probably like 10 minutes. And I'm really bad at that sometimes.
It happens to the best of us. And the rabbit holes and ranting and the housing crisis.
Yeah, the housing crisis. Private equity firms.
Yeah. All right. So I don't know how do you say this guy's username or name? Aubrey.
Which one? I don't see what you're looking at.
So getting started in initial adoption, that PDF I sent you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Hold on. I'll open it up. You sent it to me.
I categorized it by people that get so we allowed anonymous submissions, but we also, if you wanted to give your name, you could.
Yep. You see here, I got the PDF right here.
I feel like it's just a random username. The very top,
you're the getting first
started.
One.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. So Abre Yujb, it's ABREUJP. I mean, this feels like a username that's a combination of a first and last name.
Right. What are you doing to us, man? Just give us your first name. So his first question is, if you could erase one misconception about Elixir adoption overnight, what would it be and why?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think it's that I think it's like a more like there's a core misconception out there that functional programming is like this mystical like programming style that's really the world of the academics. And for me, functional programming is so simple. It's so simple. It's just this function takes a value and it spits out a value. And that's
transforming, like the idea behind transforming values versus like holding state and like object oriented. Like I struggled so hard when I was learning object oriented programming when I first started. And if it was functional and immutable, I think I would have it would have clicked immediately for me.
Well, I've recently been rewriting the entire LiveView JS client code in Elixir, and this is like part of a bigger LiveView native thing that I've been working on. But and so like my goal is not to write the Elixir version of the LiveView client. My goal is to like clone in Elixir the JS implementation, and there's reasons for that. Maintainability long term is going to be easier if I can, like, if Stefan makes a change, like there's a bug, right? He makes a change, I can see what that change was. You say, oh, okay, I know exactly where this change should go, and I can just like make the Elixir version of this change.
Mm-hmm.
But what's been like really difficult is like in JS land, if you have a variable and you like that state carries through to function calls and stuff. And so like the amount of mutability that occurs in JS, despite the fact it was written by a functional programmer, Chris, he was taking advantage of what he could for performance in JS land. So it's correct idiomatic JS, but it's really difficult to try to port that back to Elixir. And so for those that are kind of accustomed to the ease of making like mutable changes, like so for example, the DOM is a great example, right? So if you have an element and you're working in JavaScript, I can just like set the attribute on an element.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm working in Elixir, I have to go and walk that view tree every single time, update in place, reproduce the entire view tree, and now I have the view tree again. So this actually, I mentioned on Twitter like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was doing that much work on like the reproduction of the LiveView JS client in Elixir, in massive just tree walking all over the place, and then we would have to do tree walking on the Swift UI client too. And it's like this is dog shit. Like this isn't working well. And so I went out looking, and it didn't exist. So I decided to create what I'm calling GenDOM, which is a Gen server based DOM implementation where you have a tree of Gen servers. Like you have a document Gen server, and then every single child node is its own Gen server, and they have Gen server child nodes and so on and so forth. They're not supervisors. They are independent processes that I can then go directly to because I would have the PID and update the state of, and without having to do all that walking. And so like this goes back to like one of the you've probably seen it out there from time to time, that what was it, the Smalltalk programming language like was like the kind of progenitor of object-oriented design, and like the whole OOP movement kind of got it wrong, and then perhaps like the Gen server actor model is really more what it was supposed to be. And that's really where I feel like some of the adoption overhead also gets hit, because it's actually a lot more work to do this as well, even though it's it's better. It's significantly more performant. Like it's crazy fast. We got it all hooked up the other day, and we actually have like a GenDOM server running on device communicating over distributed Erlang back to Swift UI, because we have Swift UI client acting as an Erlang node.
Okay.
And we can communicate. We have a one-to-one communication between each view struct in Swift UI back to each
that's cool.
element in the Gen. It's like it's insane how fast it is.
Yeah.
And so like that has significant benefit, but it's a lot more work too than just saying like L dot like ID equals this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not so much a misconception, but I do think that it ends up being a barrier at times. But to bring it back to a specific misconception that aligns with this, is that I think that the idea that Elixir is fast is something that needs to, it's a misconception that I think hurts Elixir, because people come into it and try Elixir without building it the way that you need to make it fast. And then they decide for themselves that it's not fast because they're doing it like everything in a single process. And so there's like just the marketing that Elixir's fast and highly performant out there, and that's true. But then there's like the asterisks and like the little kind of subtext on like, but you got to build it this way, that just isn't getting out there to people.
Paul Kim says, as a Rails dev, somebody please wire up Phoenix with Hotwire and he'll fully migrate to Elixir Phoenix.
Well, I mean, not to. I, all right. So one of the things that's coming about from this live view native kind of refactor I've been doing over to GenDom, like we're running Elixir on device now. Something I'm going to experiment with is using the Hermes. I just tweeted this out, I think yesterday. Using Hermes, which is Facebook's JS engine that they use in React Native. And they have to use Hermes because they can't use Dino, they can't use Node because both of those are JITs. And Hermes is AOT, so ahead of time compilation instead of just in time compilation. And Apple does not permit any JIT on device. So Facebook had to write their own AOT JS runtime. So imagine this. Like what I've been basically building is a headless browser in Elixir. Like I have most of Web API done for window, document, element, node, text node. And I've been working on, just this morning, I was working on my own query selector parsing library, and then we'll be able to do performant. So like, so within GenDom itself, I'm using process groups. And when you append a child into the view tree, it will communicate its PID to its parent. And then the parent will have that child process join its process group. And it will keep going up the tree until it gets to the owner document or the root. And so for every single level, every root of every single like tree branch is aware of all of its descendants in a process group. So what we can do then is, instead of like what Floki does and through, I forget the CLib under the hood, but most query selector libraries, not in the browser, but most query selector libraries in languages, they'll just do like a tree walk algorithm on query selectors. What we can do is we can broadcast across all of the descendants, like the query. And so we can, in parallel, execute query, these queries, which I did it for like a basic lookup, and it was like 10, 15 times faster. And not to say that the previous tree walking was slow, because Elixir is doing tree walking all the time. It's just part of the nature of functional programming. But we would have to incur multiple tree walks because we were tree walking to like do query lookups. And then we were generating unique identifiers for each of the elements in the tree. And those identifiers were consistent on the SwiftUI side. So like if you have a text element, we would have to generate our own unique identifier to be able to communicate to the client that these are the same elements. And so we would have to then tree walk on the client as well. So we're doing like tree walking all the time. And we had certain cases where it just wasn't super performant. But now we can like distribute the querying across all of our processes, allow the processes to like communicate back up the chain, and then communicate directly to the specific view back in SwiftUI. And so all this to say, like
and all these are running like locally then on the device at that point?
Yeah.
Cool.
So we started to look into this when we wanted to start looking at offline mode. And also we started to look at implementing live components and nested live views. We had like most of the logic was pulled into this Rust library called LVN Core. And LVN Core had changed hands, I think, 4 times over the course of its development. Team members came and went. I'm a very weak Rust developer, but I can get by on certain things. But through the course of development, it implemented live view correct if you were just connecting to one live view. But the implementation that we had in LVN Core, unfortunately, was kind of dead-ended when we wanted to look at supporting live components and nested live views, because this is effectively opening up a new channel. And we would have to start like refactoring major parts of LVN Core. So what we started to look into was, okay, can we, first of all, was how do we run Elixir on device? And a few years ago, it was suggested that I look at Elixir Kit, which came out of Livebook. And so we started seriously looking at Elixir Kit like maybe 4 months ago. And right away, it was clear that this library is like super deficient. Like it's probably fine for Livebook, but for doing actual Elixir on device, no, it's just like a collection of shell scripts. And I'm not trying to knock it. It's just that it's good for the use case of Livebook. It's not good for our use case. The actual like real use case to look at is what Dominic Lentz is doing with Elixir Desktop. But so like you have some issues that exist on iOS where, like let's say you like background an application, if it's not running in Swift, like iOS will shut down network access, and so the Elixir runtime, in order to keep it alive, it has to have like these hacky things in there as far as like the process availability. And Dominic accounted for this in Elixir Desktop. And so when we started to see that, see what that implementation was, it was using like regular operating system ports to communicate over. And I think Carson founded the Swift dev I work with. He discovered the EI library in Elixir, in Erlang, which I assume stands for Erlang interoperability. And it's a C library that allows you to compile into any other language all of the necessary pieces for having that language act as an Erlang node. And so we started to play with that, and we got it running. We got it running in Swift. Carson wrote a whole library around it using Swift's actor model, and it works beautifully. And so the Swift client now is acting as an Erlang node that can connect to our Elixir process running on device. And now we're just doing regular message passing. Because I was originally looking at the gRPC for this. And because we can use protobuf to like really make sure our message passing is as fast as possible. But because Erlang had all this in it anyway, and Erlang's term format is not as bytecode compact as protobuf, but it's kind of there anyway. Like it's like a rounding error. That felt like the right way to go. So we have this org that we've created called OTP Interop, where we've been publishing like mostly, some things that we're using, like Elixir Pack is our version of actually running Elixir on device on iOS. And a couple of like interop solutions with different languages. We actually got to the point where we explored this for a little bit. And we're not going to use it, but we figure we should publish it. But we have written a WebSocket implementation where we use Swift WASM to compile the EI interface, the EI stuff into WASM, Swift WASM. I think it weighs in at like 55 kilobytes or something, or like 100 kilobytes. It's fairly small and perfectly reasonable to use. But through the browser now, we can have a browser connect to an Erlang cluster and act as a node. And so some people right away are going to go like, oh, that's insane because it's an untrusted node. So what we have in there as well is that there's an entire like Erlang, when it comes to like distributed Erlang, you can set up an entire transport layer as kind of like the interface by which communication has to come in. And you can decide whether a node is fully trusted or not. You can expose as much of the underlying interface as you want. You can decide like, oh, this is a semi-trusted or untrusted node. It's limited. Like here's your little sandbox. You can play in there. And so that's all on the OTP Interop org. And we're going to publish more there. Maybe someone will find some use for the WebSocket stuff. I thought it was pretty cool. We don't have immediate purpose for it because we're focused on like the Swift Interop stuff. Anyway, okay, so that's the first question. I said I was going to keep my answers concise.
We're cruising through.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to put a little timer on my screen. I just shut up and answer. I'll read this next one.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. For companies with Java, Python monoliths, what's the most painless way to start adopting Elixir?
What do you Rewrite it in Elixir.
There's that. I think too that. So
I think, well, like in a serious note, I like obviously you can't just rewrite things and just launch to it, right? I think you have to pick feature by feature and slowly start kind of
Yeah, it's an
meshing
iterative
things together.
approach. Like you
Yeah.
can't go to your boss and say, "Hey, our 10-year-old Java platform is old and crusty. I want to rewrite an Elixir. By the way, we're gonna trust this out of the gate." Like a more sensible approach is an iterative way to do so. You can throw Phoenix and like you can have plug or not plug. You can have what's the cowboy replacement now that's in Phoenix. Um, like the whole point is like have Elixir act as a proxy, have inbound routes, have inbound requests determine whether or not they're implemented in your Phoenix application. If they are, delegate them there. If they're not, delegate them to the old stack. You can
Hmm.
share things like cookies between the two stacks. So whatever authentication to keep that, like all that stuff exists already. And that's a perfectly reasonable approach to iteratively move over. What has been, I think,
Oh, it's
the big
Bandit. Thank you, Daniel. I
bandit,
couldn't.
yes.
Yeah.
Um, what has been the actual what we've seen at DockYard, the bigger kind of migration pain that almost nobody has opted into is migrating away from React over to LiveView. And there's because in many ways, like more of the development goes into the front end of these applications.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
so many React components, they've created so many React components that now they're concerned. Like we just spent so much money, years of development time. Now we got to throw all this away. And so what we're lacking right now is a good migration path towards moving away from React to LiveView. I actually proposed one that didn't go over well with the LiveView team, which was I actually think LiveView should be an API. Right now it's an HTML rendering like library,
Hmm.
and the event handling and the state management aspect of LiveView, I think is fantastic, but it's so tightly coupled with the template rendering
Hmm.
internally. And LiveView native works around this in some ways that I'm not super happy about, but they're necessary. Um, but if LiveView itself, like let's imagine for a moment, LiveView actually responded more like the rest of the way the Phoenix stack works, right? So you have like a Phoenix controller has multiple formats it can respond with. I feel very strongly that LiveView should do the same. There's a school of thought that it's a mix of a controller, it's a mix of a channel, and it's a view, and so a view itself should be one-to-one with the format. It's like don't let these don't let these things constrain you. Like people love the way that you build live view applications, but let's imagine like instead of sending HTML fragments or like HTML pieces that it merges back together in the client, what if instead you're emitting like JSON patch? And so JSON patch is a specification for actually sending patch updates, whether they're additions, changes, or removals to a JSON object
Hmm.
uh, from the server and merging these in. And I spiked a proof of concept in this in LiveView where like you have a React application that whose state was linked to that JSON like data object, and then events would get sent back over the wire through the LiveView connection. And the state would update on the server. It would render like it knows what its previous uh, like data state was. Like certain attributes were exposed, not all of them. Um, certain signs would be exposed to this, not all of them. And then what gets emitted is like the set of patches to migrate from the previous state to the new state. These get sent back to the client. They get merged into the client's JSON data store. And then because React is just like reactive state handling, it automatically renders on screen. And so now you've changed LiveView over from being completely just a independent sideload solution, meaning like your live view or nothing, to now being able to integrate with one of the largest, most popular web products in history. And if we end up forking like live view because we just need to do it ultimately and to fully support what we want to do with live view native, I'd probably do something in that direction where it's going to be like a format agnostic implementation that supports that use case that supports like all of the formats that we want to do with Live View Native, but having a very almost, I'll just, it'll be the same way you build out the applications from the server perspective, because I think having the state management event handling is fantastic in Live View. Just all this other untapped potential that I see from time to time. So to answer this question more succinctly, I would add in that while Elixir is it's a backend technology, we are seeing competition coming in the ways from the front end stuff. And the front end technologies sometimes are holding back the potential of migration over to Elixir, because in Elixir, like we have this, for better or worse, we have this kind of like cultural identity that we have to be in the one Elixir stack, right? To get the full value of it. And so if we're moving a web application over to Elixir, then it's kind of like we got to throw the baby out with the bathwater sometimes, and we have to move React over to Elixir. So I'd like to see a discussion on migration paths so that we can make moving away from React not just easy, but almost painless.
Yeah, that would be good.
And perhaps that is like where LLMs can come to play, because that's a lot of that ends up being grunt work type stuff.
So we do have a need for juniors. No.
Junior LLMs. Yes. That's like, I think the junior LLM is Gemini, right? Or it's like SWE, the Facebook one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What is the Facebook one?
I think it's isn't it SW or SEW, whatever it stands for?
I guess I have Google.
All right, so let's go to the next one. How do you approach Elixir adoption in polyglot environments? Full rewrite versus gradual service extraction.
It's Llama.
A lot, yeah, but I thought SWE was one of them. SWE LLM. Hold on, I just know it because Windsurf has it as like its default. All right, I don't want to get distracted by.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So this is. I mean, shouldn't polyglot environment be more open to adopting a new language? I would think.
I would think so, right? It would be easier to integrate gradually.
I think if it's a polyglot environment, you have people in that environment that like working across multiple languages.
Mm-hmm.
So proposing them a full rewrite with one language probably won't go over very well.
Yeah.
I think that it's, if you're a polyglot shop, then your probably best bet is to find the best potential fit for Elixir within that space and advocate for it there.
Oh, SWE is from Windsurf, custom built by Windsurf.
Oh, is it? Okay. All right.
Daniel just keeps swooping in to save us.
Good. What's the biggest misconception CTOs have about Elixir when evaluating it for production systems? All right. So I have an interesting story here. I think I told it on your podcast last time I was here, but a lot of the companies, so a lot of the people I spoke to early about the adoption stuff, one of the stories that multiple people had from startups was that they were forced to change away from Elixir because they could not hire enough developers. Not the sense that they needed those developers, just that their financial rounds were tied with certain hiring goals. And
yeah, we did talk about this last time you were on. An interesting.
It's I can issue. Like it's one of those weird things that I think I can understand it from the perspective of like a high level one, because these VCs, they are just swooping in on these companies every now and then, so they have to have like a system in place, right? They have to have like, here's our way to do this, and a lot of them are former entrepreneurs. Like a lot of them were at companies, and so they may be working on antiquated information at times. I've never heard anyone say that we had to move away from Elixir because people didn't like Elixir. Like there may be like ideologically somebody that just is like, hey, we're now a Python shop or whatever. But I've never heard someone say it didn't solve this for us, and that's the reason why we had to move away. It was always these like other forces at play.
Yeah, like top down decisions that aren't like, I don't think they're really based on the technology.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, well, if you have perhaps if you have access to a talented team in another stack, like that could be a good reason why.
That too,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I'm not like saying there are never good reasons to move away from Elixir, because it's always going to come down to like what's relative to that company. And like if I'm the best Java developer on the planet, then yeah, and I'm now running an Elixir like shop, I may not be able to oversee that project the way that I want to. And so
Yeah.
perhaps there's also like a comfort level at play sometimes. Whether or not these are in the best financial decisions for the company, I couldn't say. But I would say that some of the other things that CTOs tend to talk about on why they may not go with Elixir. I mean the whole. I mean, this kind of speaks a bit to what I mentioned before, but the talent pool available is smaller. There's just a perception that Elixir is a niche language, and so a lot of people at a CTO position, especially that have been at it, for most of their career, they tend to want to go with like the safer option. And that's not a knock. It's just that like you're going to be able to build the product in Node. You're going to be able to build it in Elixir. You're going to be able to build it in Java. Like clearly, there's again, Facebook's built on PHP. Like the technology sometimes is not the limiting factor. Like what comes down to the limiting factor is, okay, what's my burn rate? Like how much money do I have to go through in order to get to that point? And that's always been my long-term bet with Elixir, was that I saw this early on that it costs less money to build the same product. But we were also in a market where money was not the goal. It was a tool to be used. And so you had like just money bombs being thrown at companies. And so they weren't really forced to consider like, oh, we have to keep this within a particular budget. It was more about like, how do we get to market as fast as possible? And the best way that they knew to get to market was to throw bodies at the problem. And if your goal is to hire as many developers as possible, Elixir is not the place for that.
Yeah, Andrew makes a good point too. For an ecosystem of like quote unquote all seniors, it's also hard to find like good hires at that point too. Your
It can
hiring
be,
pool's
certainly.
smaller.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is all just like, again, it's all plays
Oh,
into
and then Zach
everything.
Daniel doesn't agree though. He said everyone that puts up Elixir jobs, they get tons of good applications.
Well, I think right now, certainly, because we've seen a lot of layoffs, and so there's a lot of good people that are looking. I think that though, if we were, let's imagine for a moment, if we had twice as many job openings, we may start to pull in people. Like what we don't need a lot of people applying the jobs. We need more job openings than there are people.
Right.
That's what's going to incentivize people to think like, oh, I should move over to Elixir and start doing that.
But that's what makes CTOs now want to adopt the stack then,
exactly.
right?
Like
it's hard to fill a role.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, ultimately, what kind of brings you out of this too is a big company like being very public and saying we chose Elixir and it solved this problem for us, and we would have been toast without it. Now at ElixirConf EU, BBC gave a great presentation on just that. I'd love to see that presentation being given at a lot of other places. Put it on the damn BBC. Like they have access to one of the biggest content like production platforms in the world. Of course that's not going to happen, but that's my point, is that like we need more of those stories. We need, in the same way that some of these companies tend to make their identity their tech stack at times, we need these companies to come out and say like, we're an Elixir stack. We would be screwed without it. Like that's the type of stuff that people look for, because then you have those that are looking towards these companies for inspiration, for like, oh, I want to be like Discord, I should use Elixir. Now all the communication layer at Discord uses Elixir, and we see periodically like some technical blog posts that come out from them. But I mean, I would love it if they would just be more public about it Like just
Yeah,
like
that
talk
would be nice.
more about what they're doing. So anyway, yeah, CTOs by and large, these are managerial people, and managerial people, their time is very limited. And so they're looking for ways to actually discount something, then adopt it. They don't get bought into the potential of something. They have their list of like requirements, and as soon as
Yeah,
something shows a red flag, they're out. And
right.
so that's where the whole kind of like dipping your toe into the language and what I said earlier about how like Elixir makes the hard things easy, but the easy things hard. And so if you're a CTO and you're still fairly technical and you're just giving an evaluation of different languages, you're trying to get up a Phoenix application and you've been through doing it in React, you've been through doing it in a couple other languages. I don't think in that scenario, Elixir performs too well because of the mind switch over to functional programming, because of the higher barrier of entry of now having to understand exactly what OTP does, and then also because we lack a lot of off the shelf stuff.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
is
think
Phoenix.new going to be the solution there? We'll
I'm
see.
gonna have to I'm gonna have to ask the story at Collects, what motivated their rewrite to Elixir, because
Mhm.
you don't necessarily have to make that choice, but I feel like there were just fans of Elixir within the company in
That's
technical
yeah.
positions, you know?
Almost every single company that I've spoken to that chooses Elixir, it's a personal choice.
Hmm.
They, I mean that their personal choice may revolve around the technical needs of it.
Of course.
But what we've not really seen is this, like, oh, of course I chose Elixir because that's just the thing to do, right? That's where you ultimately want to be with your tech stack, is that you're just the given choice. Now, how to get there is a very, very difficult problem to solve, and uh, it, in light of these massive changes that the industry is going through at the moment, this could be a big opportunity for Elixir to
Hmm.
actually break out in this way, because it's almost, in some ways, it can be seen as like a reset, right? Like if we were still where we, like if the market still was, like we move AI from it for a moment, and now it's just like it's the hard work of going on talking about it all the time. But can we juice the LLMs to prefer Elixir? Like
Hmm.
that's like the stuff that Zach's working on, stuff that came out of the adoption summit. These are the topics that are talked about, and so how to do that, that's going to be a big question to be answering over the next 12 months. So if anyone's watching this or listening to it later and they have thoughts on this, absolutely pursue them. You don't even need to you don't need to clear them with anybody. If you have an idea on how to make the LLMs play better or like prefer Elixir, go ahead and do it. And let's just see what sticks to the wall and then find out what's working and lean more heavily into it. All right,
Yep.
next question. Do you want to read the next one?
Sure. How do we convince teams using Python/Node.js that Elixir's actor model isn't just niche, but essential for modern distributed systems? I don't know if you
Uh,
have to convince anyone, because
yeah,
once you
just
start
use
having to
it.
scale any system.
Yeah, use Node's reactor thing. And I mean there's kind of like classical concurrency problems that you could like demonstrate, but like the actor model, like we've even seen this a bit. So Swift introduced its own actor model like 2 or 3 years ago, and it's pretty good, but even its actor model uh permits like mutation across
Hmm.
processes. And it's based upon this is it called AVC? Oh, Arc is this like garbage collection implementation. There's all these kind of like under the hood within Swift, there's all these checks to ensure that you're not introducing concurrency stuff. So I think that they're able to account for a lot of it during the compilation process. So you're like, you know,
Hmm.
Xcode won't let
Well,
you
I'll
compile
also
if you
say
introduce it.
Xcode has a lot of good monitoring and debugging tooling.
I'm not going to speak nicely of Xcode.
Well, I won't either. Like it's a bloated, nasty
we
machine. But I used to be strictly just like an iOS developer,
Yeah,
and there
yeah.
are like aspects of it that you miss.
Oh,
Like,
certainly. I think that like it's internal tooling is awesome. Like it's so
Mm-hmm.
good, and it's like highly tightly coupled, and that stuff is nice. What is less nice about Xcode is that Apple plays fast and loose with its releases. Like we have had
Yes.
now, I think 3 Xcode releases over the past 2 years break because like Live View Native is relying on like the craziest one
Yeah, they'll
was
just change their APIs and things too
oh,
on a
it's not
whim.
just
And
that. They got rid of environment variables. Like actually maybe about 6 months ago.
wait, what are
Um,
they? How are they handling that
so
then?
so well, they're moving over to this thing called Xcode Cloud, and I think that the intent was to try
Oh,
to like migrate the environment variables over to that. But we were leveraging the environment variables during our build process because we need to know which device we're building against. Because otherwise, like we strip out a bunch of the code at the first build step of compile time. Um, like a lot of the modifiers, like whatever isn't necessary for like building a tvOS application, for example, we strip out like through like the compile time if statements, and that leads to a much faster build time and a smaller footprint. But we had to rely upon an environment variable for this, and then one day the environment variable disappeared, and now we were looking at like every rebuild was taking like 25 minutes, and like our footprint size went from like 50 megabytes to like 300, and it was just like god damn it. And then the process of like communicating these bugs back to Apple is so opaque. It's so difficult.
yeah.
We did get it fixed eventually. I mean, we have the benefit of being an Apple vendor, and so one thing that Apple is like, Apple's amazing in a lot of things, but one thing they're really really cool about is like they allow anybody, even like Apple vendors like DockYard, to open up internal radars on issues. And because they want to know, like they don't want
Hmm.
just people just blindly just doing their job. They want, to make their stuff better. And so we were able to do that. And I don't know if it directly led back to the fix, but at least that radar was being tracked towards the fix and it ended up being fixed.
Do you have any?
So
Do you have the YouTube comments pulled up or no?
no, I don't. Why?
Zach Daniel in quotes: "Increase Elixir adoption, or you will go to jail." And he goes, "Brian to Chat GPT, probably like you threatening LLMs."
I've tried like asking the LLMs for marketing strategy stuff, like put together a Marcom strategy for this thing, and I haven't been too impressed with what it does. Like it feels like the language models are right now highly concentrated on the code gen stuff
Yeah.
because that seems like an early like market it can really displace, and like the other white collar job stuff, um, they're much further behind. Yeah, I
Do
don't
you
know
think
about.
that's because we're like devs are just more interested in the tech, so they're using it more?
I think that there's devs building it, so
So it's
they have
more just
access.
inclined to
It
just
could
lean
be.
that way.
Yeah, I mean, I also know that tech companies for past 20 years have been trying very hard to disrupt a significant portion of their payroll, which is software
Right.
developers. Um, and this part's going to piss people off, but software developers are paid too much. I I say that with an asterisk. So graduating from a code school and expecting a six-figure job is the sign of a fucked up market. Like there's like it doesn't work, and that's what we've been doing. Like so, in many ways, the pressure to increase like to increase payroll has incentivized these companies to find other outlets, and that's come in the form of offshoring, and now it's coming in the form of AI. And so we're kind of like we're instrumenting our own replacement in many ways. And so you have people that are getting paid a lot of money
You know,
for a period of time to replace themselves long term.
so I think it like I go back and forth. Like you have the fear of like being replaced, right?
Mm.
But like another like counter argument to that is I think all it's going to allow developers to do is operate their own products and startups
Oh,
more
100%.
affordably, and we're going to just
That's
see
what
ton more products.
yeah, I go back and forth on this quite often, because at the one time it's like, okay, my whole business depends upon uh, like talent loaning, right? And I mean, we're loaning out talent. And so in the space of language models, like if we follow this out to its logical conclusion and they get as good as we all dream that they might at some point, then yeah, like there's no place for that. However, what's awesome is that we'll be at the point where I can just dream up products and I can,
Right.
you know,
You can just
that's
be your
really where we
technical
want to go.
founder and
Yeah.
have multiple products, and
I mean,
now you're your own boss and you
that's
can pay
super
yourself
exciting.
as much as you want.
Yeah. And it's, it's going to be interesting though, because are we going to now be in a world where there are just millions and millions of products and everyone's
Yeah.
fighting over like a
It's going to
tiny
be
little piece of
stupid,
land?
dude. Yeah.
Yeah. So that,
The one issue I do see is you're going to see massive amounts of just cloned apps and
oh yeah, yeah,
software,
yeah,
and you'll have garbage versions, better versions, and it's just going to oversaturate
yeah.
small niches that you expect to stay niche. It's just going to get flooded.
Yep. Yep. All right. Let's move to the next question.
All right.
Um,
I
I
like
think
this one actually. Well, do you think we kind of touched on it already?
I did. Yeah, I think I did. I'll just summarize real quick. But oh no, we didn't talk about the enterprise one. But like on the startup side, um,
Well, wait.
I think that
What adoption strategies differ between startups
yeah.
and enterprises
Sorry,
is the
people
question.
can't
Yeah.
see what we see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, on the startup side, I think cash is king. And now like in especially where things are right now, um, if it wasn't for the AI stuff, I think that Elixir would be in a fantastic position to really be pitching itself as a significantly more affordable tech stack, especially with like how complex like client side application has become. Um, and so the question so Alistair Woodman, who's the head of the EEF, he and I were chatting about the Elixir kind of outreach stuff. And when he was talking about like the conversations there, I was thinking like, is there like the kind of like the commodity within the large language model world are tokens, right? And is the nature of functional programming, is the simplicity of Elixir, and it requires less people to build a similar solution. Is it going to require less tokens to generate a similar solution? And can this be kind of like a major differentiator for Elixir in that space? Like if we're
Oh, that's
showing that
interesting. I didn't think about that.
if we can get to like as much training data or like really highly effective training data into these LLMs, is it going to cost less energy to produce Elixir based applications than another stack? Because just the nature of the language itself is simpler and it should be easier to generate these solutions. So what we're lacking again are models that are well trained on Elixir. And
Yeah,
so
the
that's
problem
what I'm curious
is,
about.
well, what's all these training models too have trained off like massive amounts of data, like what like
Yeah.
Microsoft has GitHub, and then we have Stack Overflow and all these things. But where do you draw the line of what is actually good and what works? Because I think
Yeah.
we have a lot of shitty code that works, but it probably shouldn't be in production.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I hear like running out of training data is a hot topic in the LLM world. And then one of the solutions they have is that they're using the language models to generate more training data. I'm just like, that sounds like the human centipede, like problem
I was
right
just
there.
gonna say that's like Inception. That's gonna do some
Yeah.
weird
Um,
shit.
so yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that evolves. As far as the enterprise side goes, the specific pain points that I heard from enterprise people was lack of like enterprise support options. DockYard has an enterprise support tier. We don't really advertise it as much as we probably should. And so for people that have teams that are looking for long-term support for Elixir applications, um, that's something that DockYard can do. All right, there's my plug. But
Plug
like
away.
there's other yeah there's other things too, like so Elixir does not designate certain releases as LTS, and there's like when you know the nuances of Elixir and its like how it does releases and what the versions number means, and that we're unlikely to get a 2.0 unless it's just like removing deprecation warnings. Technically, I agree with that, but you got to understand, like the IT guy sitting at some medical healthcare company that has been asked to determine whether or not they can use Elixir goes on the website and looks for, just searches the page for LTS and doesn't find it, and then just says no, right? So there's like
What is the reasoning for that? I don't know. I don't even know.
The reason for not having
Just
LTS.
the long-term support for specific versions.
I don't think
Just
it's necessary. It's not really necessary, right? Like the technically, I guess, everything carries forward. Like everything that worked on Elixir 1.0, I think with the exception of some very, very special cases, continues to work. And so like technically Elixir's been in this one long-term support release for a long period of time.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
But it's like on the other hand, you kind of have to play ball with what the
people are used
general
to.
population, is accustomed to. You can't come into a room of everyone speaking English and start speaking French and expect everyone to just understand what you're talking about. Like and so I mean these are not, these are things that are like real bike shed topics on why, like whether or not Elixir should do it, but there are problems that companies get faced with that end up being like, that's a stupid reason to just discount Elixir. And it's such a simple fix, but is it really a fix that, the Elixir core team has an appetite to advertise, because now they have to have a process for like minting an LTS version. And then they have to have like a team supporting that specific version for whatever reason. And so it's not as simple as just like putting up like an LTS sticker or something on it.
Right.
There's things behind it.
We could.
I guess, but at the same time, it's like maybe as something as simple as, here's why we don't have an LTS tag, like, or explaining what.
Well, I don't know. The problem with that, and I don't know if this is a good comparison, but it's like explaining to people that are used to app stores versus like PWAs.
That was my whole thing. So we were a Netflix contractor. We built out all of their production studio products in Ember. They're all PWAs and they worked great. And then a lot of the people had trouble installing them because they're like,
wait, I just add a shortcut. That's not enough.
Yeah, they had such a hard time wrapping their mind around that. They were so accustomed to just going to the App Store, downloading, and calling it a day. They didn't understand that just open your browser and do this. The products worked amazing. They were so good. And then this was like me in a moment of just stupidity as a business owner. Netflix asked us to rewrite all the products in native, like at the time, Objective-C and then
Swift,
Java. Yeah, but no. This is back in 2018, I think. And so Swift was just like brand new. And I said, no, we're a web shop. You don't do native. And so they all go, Netflix. And I was holding my ground for no reason. Netflix is like, okay, next. And so they just went with somebody else and we were out. And that's, there's a time to be principled in like how you think applications should be built. One of those times is not when you're working with a FANG and they're employing like 30% of your company. Like,
yeah, that's rough. That is rough.
That was not the way that was not like the moment to hold my ground. It should have been as simple as like, okay, yeah, we understand all the domain knowledge. We have all the design assets. We'll just do a rewrite in native for you. That would have been the way to go. Anyway, so the other things that I spoke to people about on the enterprise side was they're looking for like database support for like Oracle database adapters for Ecto, or like Windows, was it SQL Server, like all the things that they already have and that they've paid a lot of like money for licensing. They would like to see first class support for these things, which we don't have. I think there's like an Oracle and a SQL Server like adapters out there on Hex, but they're not part of the official Hex project. So they're sorry, not part of the official Ecto project. So for whatever reason, they're just not as seen as reliable. Like the ways that sometimes enterprise goes about determining its use of certain software is mind numbing. Like it can seem like really like stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And but you got to understand they're not like spending a month or two going over like all the nuances in Elixir to understand it deeply and then make an informed decision. They're probably spending their lunch hour like doing it
Right.
and like just like giving a quick cursory check. If it doesn't immediately scream at them that it meets all the criteria, they just put an X next to it and then like talk about the next language.
I mean, I'm guilty. I had a buddy telling me to try out Elixir for like 3 years before I even gave it a second thought.
Mm.
I was just like, I don't have time. Like, I'm busy doing other things. And
Yeah.
then wanted to build a product, and I was like, okay, I'm going to research Elixir. It's like, oh, there's actually a really good fit here.
Yeah. I mean, I came to it because of Jose. I always was a big fan of his. I mean, he was on the Rails core team. I followed his progress early on in Elixir. Back when he was experimenting with like it, pre 1.0. I wasn't using it, but I was at least watching it.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to like I tend to go with trust. I like he was when he was on the Rails core team, he was consistently like one of the in my mind at least one of the smartest people on that team. Was coming up with the best solutions, and now he was saying like, oh, I have this new thing that's going to solve all these other problems, and so yeah, I'm coming along for the ride. And so that's where, and the same thing with Ember. Like I went with Ember because of Yehuda Katz, and so I put a lot of stock within people. And I think that's actually that in itself is a whole topic for discussion in the aspect of adoption. Is that we have like key people in Elixir right now that are rightly so like preoccupied with the technical capabilities of it, but we don't have like people that are really hyper focused on like how do we get mass adoption. Like
Mm-hmm.
we need like a key figure that is that type. We don't have it. And
It needs
so
to be
that,
someone's sole focus, and it's hard when it's not.
yeah, it is. But they also need to have agency. Like that
Yeah.
person has to have the agency to actually influence the direction of the language. And I don't think there's any appetite for that.
Yeah, we essentially need like a product wizard, a product guy on adoption. Like if
Well,
that
yeah,
makes sense, you know?
I mean, the kind of like base comparison I make is go and look at Laravel. Like Laravel's website is perfect for you coming in without having any knowledge on Laravel. And then within 10 minutes, it's answered all your questions on what it can do. And that's what the Phoenix website should be. But like we have this kind of, I mean, I understand why, but we have this kind of cultural tendency to not want to pick winners and losers. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like if the Phoenix website said, use this, use this, use this, use this, use this, the people that are building like the alternative version of that may feel like, how come I didn't get included? Like the Laravel crew, I think that they've actually created most of those libraries, but they've also picked the winners and losers. And so they have like juiced the economy of the usage of those libraries significantly because these
Mm-hmm.
are like a minted one, but they've also done it in the interest of adoption. Like they kind of did not preoccupy themselves with what the fallout from the development community would be of like all the open source software, and said, okay, maybe that's a problem, but our primary concern is how do we get as many people incentivized to use this as possible. And when people come to the Phoenix website or the Elixir website to evaluate the language, they want to know if it's capable of doing certain things, if there are pre-built solutions for certain things. Now, I'm
Yeah.
sure if Zach's in the chat, he's probably screaming like he's doing this right now on the Ash side of the Igniter side. He is. But those projects are downstream of like, I think he'd agree. Both of them are downstream of Elixir and Phoenix in terms of popularity. And so whether or not that were to ever happen, I don't know, but I can say definitively that from a purely marketing perspective, in a adoption perspective, Laravel is doing it right, and that's because the leader there is hyper focused on those problems,
Yeah.
and we just don't have that, and we have like a a great technical leadership team, but they fall into this sometimes the same trap that all engineers do, is that if you build it, they will come, and
Mm-hmm.
we can't do that. It's not to say there hasn't been outreach. There hasn't been like a lot of, because this adoption summit happened,
Right.
and that was a huge step forward. We have the outreach program that happens. Jose was just on Richard Feldman's podcast, or his YouTube, whatever, and he's gone on a lot of stuff. But we also can't just expect Jose to do all the work, right? Like,
Right.
so that doesn't scale, despite the fact, as great as he is spreading himself thin, but that doesn't work. Like, we
And he
need
is good. He
more of
is
these
good
people.
at it, but
Yeah.
it's it's a lot of work. Andrew brings up a pretty good point too. He said, I think in some ways the direction of the language feels a little closed off because like people do overall dislike the community hell that you see Rust do, right?
Yeah.
But there is something to having that clear path and like people being involved in the direction of a language that is kind of
Yeah.
helpful too. I don't
I
know.
mean, that's kind of the difference between like a
I enjoy the peacefulness of the Elixir community, to be honest. There's like a
so
little drama, but it's not nearly what you see in the Rust community.
yeah, I mean, I think any time that something blows up as fast as Rust does, I think the more compelling story to come out of Rust is how did they maintain their direction and stability and technical vision while growing that fast, right? Because you have like the thing that really uh uh the community that really invested in Rust big time was the blockchain community. Um there was some conference back in like 2013 or 14, I forget what it was. And the Rust community has a lot of very progressive people in it that like are they're very left-leaning, like group of people, as am I. And um I'm not in Rust, but what I was told was that there was this one big like Rust conference where basically one of the core team people on Rust had to address the crowd and said, "Look, we have to play nice with the blockchain people. We may not like them culturally, but they got the money." And that's not like verbatim what they, but this is like the kind of spirit of what was said, is that we get to play ball. And that's got to be hard. Like, on the one hand, trying to maintain your values, on the other hand, trying to like scale something up. I mean, there's definitely times within DockYard's own history where I've compromised on our values for the case of a job, and it
Hmm.
happens. Um, you're faced with either taking on a job you may not like or working with someone that you don't like, versus having to lay people off. And in that situation, I would prefer to continue to employ people.
Hmm.
In the Rust community, while they have had certainly their fair share of like drama, by and large, I think what's undeniable is that they have nailed like adoption. They haven't nailed
Yeah.
like just like now there's serious discussions about Rust being like first class within Linux, like as like one of the languages, like the only other language to actually build parts of Linux in. Um, and that's within what, a decade or less. I mean, that's crazy success story. So I think that um, the the kind of it it's difficult. Like, you can't reproduce that. Like, we can't look at Rust and say like, okay, how did they scale up? Like, we should reproduce that. Um, I think if Elixir gets big, it's going to be its own story. But I really do feel like it's going to come down to like traditional kind of like market sense. It's going to eventually, the idea that Elixir costs less to build is going to work out. Money's going to get tighter. Maybe this token cost thing I mentioned ends up playing into it. Um, what's really working against us is time, right? Like, are we 6 months away from an AGI? Are we 6 centuries away from an AGI? Like nobody knows.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's really what kind of preoccupies a lot of people's thoughts at the moment. Let's go. How do you evaluate Elixir job opportunities and spot red flags? I'm not really sure. I think we may skip this one because I'd want to know like
We need
what they're talking
more
about.
backstory. I mean,
Yeah.
does the company exist? Do they have a presence? Do they have a product? I don't know.
I think let's skip down a bit because I want to get to some questions from other people too.
Yeah,
We haven't
yeah.
focused on one person. Do you have a section you want to go over towards?
Let's go to ecosystem and tooling, and we can go to Daniel Bergholtz's
Okay.
question. What is your opinion on the most important area for increasing Elixir adoption? More courses slash tutorials, big tech adopting Elixir and being public about it, static type system, embracing more popular libraries like React, and I don't know what Shade CN is on the front
It's
end.
a UI. It's like a
Okay.
UI application.
And then improved tooling and IDE support. Some people complain about Elixir LS. Like, I think
I mean,
all of those things, honestly.
all of them. It's hard to say what's the most important because it's always relative. I think it's on a case by case basis. Or, I mean, for me, there's things that play off of each other. Like when we get we finally get the full static type system into Elixir, that should actually make some of the language server stuff easier.
I don't
Um,
understand, honestly, like the whole we need types in Elixir. I don't understand
oh,
that argument. Like
well,
some people are so adamant about it,
yeah.
like as a reason why they won't use it. But I don't know if I don't fully understand the issue there.
And the people that say they're not going to use language because of lack of types are just like nuts. I mean, there's plenty of companies that are running multi-billion-dollar platforms without strong types, but
Right.
strong types are a huge like code assist. Uh, so for example, Swift, part of the reason, as I understand it, why uh, uh, Swift is seeing greater adoption within Apple and they're pushing harder and harder is because of its type system. Because, like, look at it from Apple's perspective. If you're using an iOS application and it crashes because of some sort of like type like issue, or like something that could have been found out at compile time, are you blaming the application or are you blaming Apple? Like some people may blame the app, but there's going to be people that blame Apple. And so it's actually like if the applications are crashing due to things that can be solved through a type system, this helps Apple. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's good reason to do it. I think too that there was this massive shift over with TypeScript towards everyone just like we tend to be software developers very
Andrew called me
like
a type hater. I'm not a type hater. Like when I was writing JavaScript, I was a TypeScript fan. Like I get it. I
yeah.
just feel like it's less important in an immutable, like functional language like Elixir.
Well, I mean, what's also tricky is you know because Elixir sits on top of Erlang, Erlang's not typed, and
Right.
so like that's why the Set-theoretic types that Jose's been working on is really the only type system that could work here. Like what Gleam did is like a veneer of types, right? And so it's a
Mm-hmm.
type system on veneer syntax, but it's not all the way down. Now, as I understand the Set-theoretic types, is that because it is making it's able to make an analysis of what the types could be or should be. We're going to actually see the full benefit of that. I could be wrong about that assumption, but we should see the full benefit of that, like up and down, like the compilation chain. So if you have a library that you're using that is built before types, it will still be subject to the type system. And so that was always like the hang up
Yeah.
for adding types to Elixir was, oh shit, are we going to have to like go to Elixir 2.0 for this? But the Set-theoretic type implementation gets us around that while adding in types. However, the benefit of a traditional type system is that you're leveraging people's pre-existing knowledge on how type systems work.
Mm-hmm.
And set-theoretic types are brand new. Like, this is novel computer science work, with Elixir being the first language to implement it, as far as I'm aware. And so if part of the motivation for introducing a type system is to satisfy people's like concerns about not having a type system, is introducing a type system that is vastly different than the type systems they're accustomed to not going to solve that problem for them, right? Like, so I'm posing a question. I don't have an answer there. I really like to, like, it's going to be interesting to see as the set-theoretic types develop further, if those coming from strongly typed languages are picking it up easily enough, or if they're like, my mental model for type systems is this, and it's almost easier to adopt a type system without a pre-existing like notions on how type systems should work, right? If your brain's already wired for like a traditional type system, and then you're coming to set-theoretic types, is that almost going to be like trying to ride your bicycle like backwards, and it's going to be just be too much? I don't know. I hope it isn't, because number one, because Jose's put a ton of time into this. Number two, because I want to see Elixir get more adoption, but I haven't heard from anybody that is like coming from a strongly typed language and what their thoughts are of set-theoretic types. Like that's a question I have. I'd like to see.
Yeah. Zach is a very big fan of types. He says since Ash is very type heavy, bring on all the types.
No, I'm a big fan of types as well. I mean, I was advocating for types to be added to Elixir years ago. And I mean, there's all sorts of potential benefits like for types. Like our editors can become like Elixir LS or whatever the new combined thing is, that can become smarter. It's going to help inform like the LLMs will get better working with Elixir. Like certain things would go away too. So like let's imagine like Phoenix components, right? All of the the component attributes that you declare, like these could actually be pulled into types. And so there's potential on leveraging set-theoretic types outside of just like compile time warnings that have yet to be realized. And so I don't know at what point of development the set-theoretic types need to get to before that happens, though. It seems like we are getting gradual rollout, which is totally fine, because each new Elixir version, I get to rerun my tests. And it actually the other day found a so I'm writing a parser for the selectors, and it found a really weird recursive problem for me. Like this problem absolutely would have come up when someone used it. I just wasn't accounting for it in my test cases. And yeah, the type system found that problem. So that saved the day there.
Yeah, that was nice.
Let me pick another one here. Let's see here from Jaron. Does Elixir need a nonprofit foundation of some sorts to help with a unified marketing or outreach program? There seems to be a lot of reliance of individual contributions in companies such as Dashbit, DockYard, Allenbeck, but nothing really centralized. Well, we have one. It's called the EEF. And I mean, DockYard's involvement with EEF has been pretty limited. And I think in part because my early involvement with the EEF was through the marketing sub team. And I remember I was trying to put out a community survey for Elixir. And so I was like, hey, let's do this through the marketing sub team through the EEF. Within like 15 minutes, they took an Elixir survey and just wanted to make it for every single goddamn language under the beam. And I was like, no, that's not we need like focused answers here. We can't do this for everybody. And so like, there's a lot of people involved with we're involved with EF, or maybe they're still there, that are just dedicated towards treating all of the beam languages evenly and fairly. I'm more of the mind that, look, Elixir is the clear and obvious winner here. It's like the most popular or like Beam-based language. The focus should be on Elixir, because if we're treating like Elixir on the same level as we're treating like LTE, like LFE, list flavored Erlang, or Robert Verding's like list Erlang is. If we're treating everything equally, then we're significantly holding back. Like, we're not propping up these other languages. We're holding back the overall ecosystem. Instead, Elixir should be kind of like the torch that leads the way. Like, it should be in many ways, the kind of killer app for introduction to the Beam. Like, make Elixir as big as possible, and these other languages will get more popular too. The other thing too with the EEF is that until recently, they had no way of actually earmarking contributions for particular use. And this, I think, as of last fall, is now a solved problem. And so if you were to donate like $100,000, a company will donate to like these nonprofits for a language because they want a problem solved, right? And if you're donating to solve, let's say you want to accelerate the type system work, and you say, hey, we're going to donate $100,000 to the EEF. The EEF could have used that money for anything. Not to say that they would, but company donating a lot of money wants some guarantees. They want to know that like 90% of it is going to go towards what they're donating it towards. And it's not just going to get distributed evenly across different projects. So I for a period of time, I actually was an advocate for Elixir forming its own foundation because of some of these issues with the EEF. But Alistair Woodman, who's the head of the EEF, he's done some like really, really great work over the past few years to solve these problems. So he's aware of these things that are necessary, and I think he's the right person to be steering that ship and continue to do so. So, Jaron, I would highly advocate to, like, if there are things you want to contribute towards, it's going to be through the EEF.
I think that's good.
Let's do two more questions, and then we'll call it.
Yeah, we do have quite a bit. Let's see. Role, community education, or relations and perception?
Let's do relations and perception.
All right.
What about this first one? What do we do with the awful hostility? Yeah, anonymous. What do we do with this awful hostility of some members of the Elixir community, most notably the Slack? Honestly, I don't see, like, I've certainly been involved in my own, like, I'll get heated on something from time to time.
Brian likes the drama a little bit, I think.
I don't like the drama. I like getting to the heart of issues. And I've found at times that there's a lot of developers out there that don't want to face like hard realities at times. I don't mind facing these issues. I actually think that it's healthy to do so. And so I don't mind like standing my ground. If I'm wrong about something, I'll completely change my mind. Like I'm the
Andrew is asking what the hostility is. I don't think he knows.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'd be curious to see,
like, maybe like there was a little bit of drama about like between like live view stuff and like your DOM stuff, right? But nothing like crazy. Or
not the DOM stuff. I advocated very heavily for certain things. They didn't get in. I wasn't happy about it. And then all right, I'll tell you this, but I was told if I wanted these things that I need to pay for it. And I was so pissed off. I was like, I fucking paid for most of LiveView already. And so, to hear that like thrown in my face, I thought was just really insulting, and kind of is the subtext of kind of the interactions I have at times. Because, I can say definitively that once my ability to continue to fund certain efforts within Elixir dried up in the past year, a lot of doors shut to me immediately. And
that's unfortunate.
It's really, yeah. I mean, I don't want to make a big thing about that. It is what it is, but It's like it can feel at times. I like being like working on a team, even if it's not like we're all the same company, but we're all working towards a cause.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like, you're only as good as your money at times. In Elixir, I've never had that in another community. And so when that kind of got reinforced, when that was said to me in Slack, it really pissed me off.
Yeah.
But I don't know what other drama is happening. I actually mute the general channel, and so maybe there's stuff happening in there.
I'm not even in that. Like, I try to not use Slack.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I have found the Discord.
I'm really bad at being like available via chat, anything.
Yeah,
It's not a strength of mine.
I have found the Discord to be kind of refreshing at times because it's almost like completely different crowd in there, and
Interesting.
I'll kind of like jump between the two. I think that both the Slack and the Discord are pretty well run. There's certainly some things that I wish were different in each. Like the whole, I still have people that don't know how, like, if we're bringing on a client to Elixir and they want to join the Slack, it's still kind of a pain in the butt to join the Slack sometimes, or it's difficult. The Discord one, I think the admins are a little bit too heavy-handed with limiting the channels in there.
I hate every time I have to join like a new workspace or whatever they're called on Slack. I never remember how to log in and do their magic links, and it's always a
Yeah.
pain. But Discord's nice. I like Discord. If you want a really quiet, nice community, Elixir Mentor is a great Discord channel.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, come hang out. We got Zach in there now, so that's
Cool.
fun.
But there's also something to be said about like the bifurcation of these communities. And this is going back to like the beginning of the conversation. Maybe this is a good place to kind of wrap up. When we had everyone on Twitter, like for better or worse, like there was a lot of people there, and now they're split across Blue Sky, this Mastodon, Twitter, and so like getting messaging out becomes more difficult because now was it Peter Solnick? He created the Just Cross Post application, which is great, and but that's only necessary because in order to reach the full community, you have to do that. I heard
it's so annoying because I hate like I'm only on social media to like post, Elixir Mentor stuff, and I hate joining a bunch of different social platforms just to post the same thing over and over, which the Just Cross Poster, that's a great platform. But like I also get annoyed with like just having to pay attention to multiple platforms.
That's the problem. And that's why it can suck running consultancy, because you have to do this stuff. Like you have to be on top of it. You have to be active. You have to be out there. You have to always, and it can just be tiring and exhausting. I'm 45. I mean, I'm not old, but I'm not young either. And I'm so sick of the merry-go-round of like the market's up and down, up and down, up and down. And now having to just put yourself out. It's just, God damn, I just want stability. I want stability. I want to kind of just not have to constantly reinvent. And because that's also the other thing with consulting is that you constantly have to be kind of a bit ahead of the adoption curve of new technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now like, oh, now I have to like reinvent everything because of AI. And it's just like, it's just exhausting. It's so tiring.
Like being in tech in general is exhausting because you can't just be like, I know it all.
Yeah.
I know that's thing.
It used to be that way, right? It was like 5 languages, but not anymore.
Now every day I wake up, I'm like, I don't know anything. What am I going to do today?
Well, that's actually, I mean, there's a whole school of thought that once you start to realize you don't know anything is when you can actually start to learn, or you've actually learned enough to know that you don't know anything.
That's the problem, right? You know enough that you're like, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
It's the Dunning-Kruger curve, right?
Yep.
I miss the cocky peak, like where you thought you were on top of the world.
Oh, I think that was like 2018, 2019. It's a DockYard. That's when we had Apple, Netflix, a couple other clients. Like cars.com was a big client for
you probably felt pretty good.
Yeah. Well, that's when I retired. So that's what I was like, well, I got burnt out. I hit bottom probably about a year and a half before I left DockYard.
Burnout is, I know like a lot of people discount it, but it's real. It hit me hard. I moved into an RV and was living in the mountains in the middle of
Yeah.
nowhere for like a year because of it.
The problem is that we tend to start to compare ourselves to these like hyper productive people. Like, why
Yeah.
can't I do that? But then you don't realize that they have a lot of help and support around them as
Right.
well. The other thing too is, not a lot of people like understand this, because like we live in a culture where, these massive tech CEOs and everyone's like, oh, what a great life. Being a CEO can actually be kind of lonely at times. There's not a lot of other peers to talk to. You can't like really talk to your employees about some of the problems because you have to be the
Right.
leader. You can't like, there's no other like, can't like really socially talk about this, because if you try to do it on social media, people go, oh, boo-hoo, fucking tech CEOs. Like, it's
Yeah.
sad. It's like but they're legitimate like things that everyone goes through, and there's no like kind of real outlet for other CEOs to kind of like discuss these things openly, because all it takes is one person to like maybe have a legitimate problem with people on their team and like talk about that problem, and someone else to screenshot it and then put it out
Right.
there,
Yeah.
and then like you're screwed.
Yep.
I'll just talk to the LLM. There's actually,
dude, you should, I just like retweeted, my buddy sent this to me. It's kind of like terrifying. Who sent DHH? Don't ask AI anything you wouldn't want opposing counsel to read during discovery. Anything you say may indeed be used against you in the court of law.
Yeah. Well, who is it? Was it New York Times is now suing OpenAI to do data retention on all queries. And so, I mean, perhaps that's what he was referring to. But yeah, I mean, certainly they're already doing it. Like the whole, like OpenAI isn't resisting this because they're not saving all the data you give them. Of course they are.
Right. Yeah.
But they just don't want to open it up because now it's going to hurt their like adoption if people feel like whatever crazy crap people are asking LLMs to do.
Oh, dude, I don't even want to know what people are asking.
Yeah, you can't wipe that browser history, man.
Oh man. It's an interesting time, man. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. Let's get in one more question.
All right.
So let's see here. We got Mike. In my circles, I find that Elixir Live View and real time tend to go hand in hand, which makes some dismiss it. If they don't think they need a real time UI, do you think there needs to be a better story around the benefits of Elixir outside Live View or letting it crash? Yes. I mean, I think that anyone that's built a Live View application probably, will understand this, that it's not just a real-time like UI framework. I'd say that not very often am I really instrumenting any like real-time type stuff. It's definitely there when you need it, and it's super easy to implement when you need it. But if the general perception of this tech stack outside of our community is that it's just really well suited for real-time stuff, then we certainly need to find ways to communicate that differently. I think that
it doesn't just stop. It isn't only good for real time.
Yeah, I mean,
it's quite it's awesome for real time, but it doesn't have to just be for real time. Like it's a very like fast performative web technology.
Yeah. All right. I think we should probably cut it there. Sorry, people, we didn't get to all the questions.
We had a lot, actually, more than I thought we would, but
well, it's kind of like this Abrujup guy. He did
that guy went wild.
Yep. So I hope we answered most of his questions and got to a lot of other people's.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always appreciative, and like our chat, I think this is the busiest chat has ever been for one of my live streams.
There is a mobile Live View native section. People ask some Live View native questions, but because this is an adoption specific talk, I think we can hold on to I'd like to come back on maybe closer to August when we're rolling this stuff out.
I know we were talking about that, so we're gonna do a whole like Live View native podcast. It'll be good.
Whole month of Live View native.
A whole month. Well, I'll have to maybe I have to bring back my roots and go back to being a mobile dev for a couple tutorials and do some live view native stuff on my channel.
It's been cool. I mean, the stuff that we're doing right now is it's going to be, so it's greater than live view native. Let me put it that way. We have a path forward to actually be able to support like Hotwire as a development platform, Livewire, pretty much we can actually adopt React Native to this as well. Like I've effectively, a lot of the work I've been doing is creating a specification standard for server-driven UI applications through markup. And then the headless browser is our kind of path for doing that. And then it's just a matter of like a client connection, which is the equivalent of the JS like library for each of those. So like there's a lot of stuff that, even though the progress public facing has been stuck on 040 RC1 for a while, because we started to like really scratch the surface of the live components, nested live views, offline mode, it became clear that LVN core as it was implemented was not ultimately the right solution there. And so once we started to like really go down this road and all the OTP interop stuff that we've been releasing, it hopefully will not only provide the experience that everyone wants out of this, but also resonate really well and then resonate outside of the Elixir community too. So that's kind of like our big goal.
I think it's awesome. I'm excited for it. I need to just start being better at actually making time now to use all these awesome libraries that are coming out.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
I've had like several applications. We have products that we want to build. I've been waiting on just getting our, getting to the live components stuff, that's live view stuff in live view native and offline mode.
Yeah. That'll be cool.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me. It's always fun having you on. So, and everyone else, thank you for tuning in and being wild. Like I couldn't even keep up with the chat. So I love that. But I hope everyone has a good weekend. And I don't have a podcast next Friday, but I think the following, I don't know, all my events are posted. But so yeah, thank you guys. Have a good weekend.
Testing.